taking us live.
Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Wednesday, December 4th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Issa Stanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 425 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we'll have a discussion with Issam Younis, the director of Al-Mezan Center for Human Rights, about the scope of Israel's crimes over 14 months of genocide and the challenges faced by Palestinian human rights defenders who continue to document these crimes while themselves trying to survive. Later on in the program, Jon will break down the resistance news from Gaza, including operations in Rafah and Jabalia, and will bring us up to date on the uneven ceasefire in Lebanon. But first, before we go to the news report, we're delighted to be joined by Donya Abu Sitta live from Gaza. Donya, are you there?
Yeah.
Hi, so good to see you.
Hi, Donya. We're so happy you could join us.
Thank you. I want to inform you that it is extremely difficult to join the live stream from Gaza due to the lack of electricity and numerous difficulties in obtaining a stable internet connections. Despite these difficulties, I'm determined to speak to you today because 2 days ago I overheard a child who is 3 to 4 years old next door of us. He tells his mother that he was hungry, and sadly his mother replied that there is nothing in the market to feed him. This is heartbreaking. Yesterday, while I was sitting on my office and feeling hungry and cold as all people in the Gaza Strip, I decided to go this live stream and join to you. I speak to you from the heart of beloved Gaza, a place that currently drowning in sea of pain and suffering. I feel the chill of winter seeping into my bones. I'm reminding of the children who are shivering in the intense cold. I'm here to tell the world about the Israeli crimes in Gaza Strip. We adults can stay without eating all the day, but what about the children? The bread is the most common element in each meals in Gaza Strip. But from the beginning of October, we didn't find out. What is the children get to live these circumstances? There is nothing in the market to buy. If you find something that will be unhealthy, where flour infested with willies, as well as pasta and rice were stored in difficult conditions. And also, there is no help from the international organization because the help and aid tracks stuck in Egypt. If you're lucky, you can get a meal during all the day, and if it not, you can drink the water to trick your minds that you are at something. Surely, if you walk in the street, you will see the people tiredness from their faces. You will feel their hunger and their sadness. Every day, I see the people or sad kids who are crying because of hunger. Children must live beautiful and colorful lives, not this life, because they deserve fun and happiness. They want the simplest rights, which is food, life, education, and health. Children mean a lot to me. I work months with the children, and on World Children's Day, my children ask me where our childhood is. I didn't manage to answer them. They face all these difficulties with their educations. They have no weapon but their dreams. There is no better harder than keeping their hearts alive during this death surrounding them. As Salah Matar told me, who is one of my students, who is just only 4 years old, that the Israeli soldier take his father in front of him, and he didn't speak for months. In addition, the Israeli force continue targeting people and forcing them to evacuate it again and again, especially in the north of Khan Younis, Al-Qarara city, and in the north of Gaza, Beit Lahia. Today in the morning, they forced people in the shelters to evacuate it. They are targeting the schools in Beit Lahia like Abu Tamam schools. There are more than 5 Palestinians were killed and many injured. But the main and the center question is, where are they to go? In Gaza, it is a winter, so it's so cold in the evening. Where people go? To the beach? I mean Al-Mawasi? It's so cold in the center area. What about in the area near the beach? The clothes are not available and no enough blanket. The weather is so cold, no medicine and no health care available, and no food and no life here.
Donya, thank you for reporting that. It is unimaginable, especially I think for parents and people who are taking care of their young children. I mean, how do you even begin to describe daily life for yourself and for your children? What kind of conversations are you having with these children, with your kids and with your relatives about just trying to survive another day under these conditions?
Actually, I work with them to teach them the English language, and with games and funny activities to let them feel happy and fun things during this genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And you are working, I believe that you have a kindergarten in Deir el-Balah
Yeah.
for young children. It's not a formal school. It's just one that is organized for the children in the area. Can you tell us more about how you're trying to keep children educated and to try to make them feel some normality in their lives in Gaza?
At the beginning, it is in Khan Younis, in the middle of Khan Younis. I
Khan
teach,
Younis, yeah.
KG1 and KG2 and the first grade. I teach them the letters and the stories about wars, and to be educated in English, to be able to reflect their suffering in the world. And we did some videos for them to show the difficulties here in Gaza.
And how do you find that children in Gaza are reacting to coming to a classroom? Do they feel that it gives them some kind of normal feeling or normal life? Is there any way for them to feel, even for a few hours, that they're living a normal type of childhood, even in the middle of this genocide? Or is that impossible?
It's not as the normal life, surely, but it's something better than nothing in this genocide. At the beginning, there is small numbers or students, but after that, there's people become to be educated because there's children is feel something negative in their lives because they always thinking about the war and death and so on. So their parents send them to educate.
And how tell us, is it, this is a kindergarten that you have organized, or tell us who's organizing this, and are there similar efforts in other parts of Gaza? In other words, even if the schools officially are closed and the situation in Gaza is in chaos, people are organizing for education, to help each other. Tell us how people are coming together as members of the community to try to support each other in this horrifying situation, unbearable situation that has now lasted for more than 14 months. How are people coming together in that way?
Actually, here in Gaza, we are all people in Gaza live as a big family, so they all help each other. When the schools closed because of this genocide, we start to make individual efforts to start centers or tends to educations, and in these days the UNICEF start to organize something special for children, but it isn't enough for all students. So there is people organize their own these things in individuals' efforts.
And how many children do you have coming to the kindergarten where you do this work? And you do this work as volunteers?
Yeah, it is totally 300, and I teach 6 grades, 3 KG1 and 3 KG2. And 1 first grade, and each class has 25 to 30 students.
And what kind of classes, what kind of subjects are you able to teach, and what do the kids want to know?
We have 3 main parts, which is the teachers that teach in these situations. That is the first one is English language and activity classroom. There is a room that is include games and activities to support them mentally and physically, and there is Arabic language, religions, and soft skills.
And Donya, is this effort, this incredible effort to care for the children in your community and to keep them educated, is it supported by any type of organizations in Gaza? Does UNRWA have a role, UNICEF, any other organizations? Just give us a sense of if there's any type of support for this work.
Until this moment, there is nothing support, but we hope to get new supports or any supports from others.
Okay.
We start this things as a volunteer work because actually from before the war, I was working with the kids and I love them so much. So, and this means a lot to me. And when I see that even a child happy because these events, I feel happy. So I do my best to let them feel happy.
Thank you. Yeah, that's some of the most important work. Yeah.
It's incredible, and I've seen some of the pictures. I think we're going to see some later in the program of the children. But I just want to say, Donya, how tremendously important this work is, and just talk to us also about the situation where you are in terms of you talked about in your report the difficulty of obtaining any type of nutritious food. But talk to us about the situation. Are you seeing any change? Is it getting any better? Is it getting worse? Do you see any type of humanitarian aid reaching people where you are?
Every second we have hope to change this or difficult to return to our normal life. But when I hoping to do that, there is something isn't right. But I hope that will be okay in next days.
We hope so. We're praying for an end to this horrible suffering. It's absolutely unbearable.
Donya Abu Sitta, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's not easy to find, a shred of electricity and, internet access. It's been hard for the past 14 months, but, we appreciate your efforts doing that so that you can speak directly to listeners all over the world, viewers all over the world. And please keep us posted on this initiative, of course, this classroom, these children. Please let us know that you're okay, and we'll check back with you very shortly.
And Donya, of course,
thank you so much.
Donya, of course, also writes for the Electronic Intifada, and so read her articles at the Electronic Intifada. And Donya, we always hope to see more of your articles, and we are so grateful to you for the work you're doing. I'm so grateful that you wanted to come on the live stream to talk about the situation in Gaza. We would welcome you anytime you can come. We're so happy that you are able to join us. And on behalf of everyone who's watching and listening, we pray for your safety and for the safety of everyone in Gaza and for the success of all your efforts.
Thank you so much for your efforts.
Thank you, Donya. I'm really glad we were able to get her on last minute. Just extraordinary. And in the news report that's coming up, I will be highlighting a story that her sister Lubna wrote for us a few days ago about the kindergarten.
Yeah. And I actually highlighted that story. I was so deeply touched by it that we made that the sort of centerpiece of our Giving Tuesday appeal yesterday at the Electronic Intifada. That's the story that Lubna Abu Sitta, who's Donya's sister, wrote, and they organized this wonderful celebration for International Children's Day for the children in that makeshift kindergarten that Donya was telling us about. And they went to extraordinary efforts to get treats for the children. I know you'll say more about that, but I just wanted to say more now, just to say thank you. We sent out our Giving Tuesday appeal yesterday by email. For those who are on the email list, they got it, and on social media. And the response was tremendous. We had a matching challenge of $35,000 that a couple of really generous people put up. They said, if you raise $35,000, we'll match it dollar for dollar. We actually doubled it, more than doubled it. We're still adding up the numbers, and that puts us in. That's really wonderful that people are willing to help us do this work and support this work in the year ahead. And if you missed the Giving Tuesday appeal, don't worry. You can still make a donation, and it will still be incredibly helpful to supporting our work, to supporting our writers in Gaza and all we do. And you can just go to electronicintifada.net and press donate now. There's a link in the description to the YouTube video if you're watching this. And just again, a huge, huge thank you to everyone who pitched in yesterday. And I'll be in touch with you again soon.
Thanks for that, Ali. And we have so much more coming up in this broadcast. We'll have a discussion shortly with Issam Younis of Al-Mezan Center for Human Rights, and of course, John's resistance report after that. But first, here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Gaza, where airstrikes and massacres continued across all areas of the coastal enclave. Last week, the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza reported that since the beginning of this genocide in October 2023, more than 1,400 families have been completely wiped out and erased from the civil registry, and more than 3,400 families have only one survivor left. The United Nations says that after 14 months of strikes and shelling, Gaza now has the highest number of child amputees per capita anywhere in the world. Many of these children have lost limbs and undergone surgery without anesthesia and have no access to rehabilitation services to cope with the life-altering injuries caused by this war, the UN says. In North Gaza, Israel's campaigns of systematic slaughter, destruction, and starvation is now in its 9th week. On Monday, the Gaza government media office stated that over the last 60 days of the ethnic cleansing operation in North Gaza, more than 3,700 Palestinians have been killed or are still missing. 10,000 have been wounded, more than 1,700 have been abducted by the Israeli army, and vital sectors have been destroyed. This is a video by Jabalia resident Mohammed Abdurrahman from last week. Journalist Anas Al-Sharif noted that, quote, "This is one of the most important streets in Jabalia camp, Al-Hujah Street, which was destroyed by Ariel Sharon in the mid-70s and rebuilt by the camp residents. Today, Israel is returning to take revenge, not only on the residents of Jabalia camp, whom it killed and displaced, but also on the trees and stones." Eyewitness testimonies have revealed that up to 650 bodies of Palestinians have been lying in the streets for 2 consecutive months due to the prevention by the Israeli military of allowing rescue, emergency, and paramedic crews from accessing the bodies, the Gaza government media office stated. Stray dogs have been devouring the bodies scattered in the streets, and the names of those corpses are still unknown. Quote, "The Israeli occupation deliberately continues its aggression in a barbaric, brutal, and planned manner against civilians, safe civilian residential neighborhoods, displacement and shelter centers, and to take revenge on them, displacing tens of thousands of them and forcing them to be displaced from their residential neighborhoods and homes. This crime is considered a crime against humanity as classified by international law. What our Palestinian people are being subjected to in the northern Gaza Strip governorate is unbelievable by reason and logic," the media office added. Bombings in northern Gaza over the past week were reported in Beit Lahia and Jabalia. At least 10 people were killed in Beit Lahia on Sunday, when Israel targeted a home. On Saturday, Gaza's civil defense reported that at least 40 Palestinians were killed and buried in the rubble after Israel bombed a house in Tal al-Zatar. A child was killed by Israeli artillery fire on a school turned into a shelter for displaced people in Jabalia on Monday. In Gaza City, also on Monday, an Israeli airstrike targeted a market and bombed the Sabra neighborhood in a separate attack. While Americans were gathering for Thanksgiving meals on Thursday, November 28th, more than 75 Palestinians, including children, were killed in 2 separate strikes on residential buildings in Beit Lahia. The Palestinian Civil Defense, which cannot reach the areas due to Israel's access prevention, stated that homes near the buildings are inhabited and their residents may have also been killed or injured, but, quote, their destiny remains unknown. Also on Thursday, Israel targeted and burned the Auni al-Hartani shelter in North Gaza. Journalist Hossam Shabat reported that Israel used quadcopter drones to drop the bombs. Another shelter at the Al-Tabayin school in Gaza City was bombed last week, killing at least 9 Palestinians and injuring at least 20 others. In central Gaza, Israeli snipers, drones, helicopters, and naval ships have attacked areas in Deir Balah and Nuseirat, according to our contributor, Abu Bakr Abed. Last week, Israel bombed the Al-Nasra Tower in Nuseirat. Nine Palestinians were killed and several others wounded on November 28th in heavy Israeli airstrikes targeting the Nuseirat refugee camp. The assault included intense bombardments north of the camp, preceded by numerous airstrikes in the same area, according to Al-Mayadeen News. Meanwhile, at the Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia in North Gaza, the United Nations reports that an emergency medical team of 6 physicians from the Medical Emergency Rescue Committee in Indonesia was able to reach the hospital as part of a medical mission, delivering a fuel tank and medical supplies. The UN states that the hospital, which now hosts 63 patients, including 9 in the intensive care unit, has been functioning with extremely limited resources. It has also been relentlessly attacked over the last 2 months. Dr. Ahmed Al-Khalut, the director of the intensive care unit at Kamal Adwan, was killed by an Israeli sniper on Friday as he reportedly entered the gate of the hospital. His colleague and the director of the hospital, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, led burial prayers for Al-Khalut alongside his staff. Dr. Abu Safia himself was injured in a recent Israeli drone attack, as we reported last week, while he walked from the operating room to his office inside the hospital. In October, Abu Safia's son Ibrahim was killed in an Israeli bombing on the hospital grounds. Abu Safia held burial prayers for Ibrahim and buried him in the hospital courtyard. On Tuesday, Abu Safia reported that the hospital had been targeted for the 5th time by Israeli drones dropping bombs filled with shrapnel that injure anyone who dares to move. He said, quote, "This situation is extremely urgent. Kamal Adwan Hospital has been ruthlessly attacked by drones, and once again, the occupation is focusing its aggression on medical teams. Just a short while ago, 3 of our medical personnel were injured, one of whom is now in serious condition and undergoing a complex surgical procedure in the operating room. We are exhausted by the ongoing violence. Why are we subjected to such brutality? Each day, the hospital is systematically targeted." Along with the repeated direct targeting of medical personnel and hospital wards, Israel is also blocking medications and basic supplies, as well as deliberately damaging medical equipment. Doctors Without Borders emergency coordinator in Gaza reported this week that, quote, "shortages of critical supplies have reached such levels that we are now forced to turn away patients in some facilities. Restrictions and obstacles to the entry of aid by the Israeli authorities continue to severely hamper our ability to provide care. Meanwhile, the looting of aid trucks within the enclave is making it difficult for that small amount of aid allowed by Israeli authorities to reach those in need. Ultimately, it's the patients who suffer the consequences." The medical aid organization said that at Nasser Hospital in Khan Younis, basic supplies like gauze and bandages are running out, forcing care providers to extend dressing change intervals and heightening infection risks. Also at Nasser Hospital, Doctors Without Borders says that they have not been able to set up a clinical bacteriology laboratory because the cold chain to operate it has been constantly, quote, "opened and damaged by Israeli officers at the crossing point." In Deir Balah, the organization's field hospital is struggling due to a lack of painkillers and antibiotics, hindering pain management and the treatment of low respiratory infections among children. Food insecurity and starvation continues to envelop the Gaza Strip due to Israel's tightened blockade, collective punishment measures, and direct attacks on food providers. Chef Mahmoud Al-Madhoun, who fed thousands of people every day in North Gaza, including patients at Kamal Adwan Hospital, was targeted and killed in an Israeli drone strike on November 30th, as he reportedly stepped outside his home on the way to make food for people at the hospital. Al-Madhoun worked with the Gaza Soup Kitchen, which coordinated food aid efforts in the north. The group issued a statement mourning him and his work. Quote, "We believe he was killed because of his unwavering dedication to solving problems for Kamal Adwan Hospital and ensuring they had whatever they needed. Mahmoud was a lifeline, standing in the way of the ethnic cleansing they are determined to carry out, and they would not allow that to continue." Mahmoud Al-Madhoun had 7 children, the youngest only 2 weeks old, and the oldest still in the hospital recovering from critical injuries caused by an Israeli quadcopter, the Gaza Soup Kitchen added. The day before, on November 29th, 2 young girls and 1 woman suffocated to death while in line in large crowds waiting to obtain bread at a bakery in Deir Balah, according to the World Food Programme, amid severe flour shortages and reduced food distributions due to access constraints and insecurity. The World Food Programme said that the lack of food aid and the absence of the commercial sector are driving people into hunger, urging authorities to provide the secure conditions necessary to ensure that humanitarian aid can reach people in need. As of December 3rd, only 5 out of 19 World Food Programme-supported bakeries are operational across the Gaza Strip, including 4 in Gaza City and 1 in Khan Younis. On Sunday, UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestine Refugees, announced that it was pausing aid delivery through the Karmi Abu Salam or Kerem Shalom crossing, citing safety concerns, repeated attacks and looting by armed gangs, and the, quote, ongoing siege, hurdles from Israeli authorities, political decisions to restrict the amounts of aid, lack of safety on the aid routes, and the targeting of local police. In response, the Gaza government media office called on UNRWA to reverse its decision and instead increase the amount of aid and number of aid trucks and to bring them through other crossings. The media office urged the UN agency, quote, not to resort to taking negative measures that threaten the lives of more than 2 million civilians and displaced persons, especially children and women in the Gaza Strip. Israel once again targeted and killed staff of the World Central Kitchen this week. 3 employees of the international group and 2 bystanders were killed when Israel bombed the car they were traveling in on Saturday. In April, Israel killed 7 of their staff members who were driving in a clearly marked convoy. World Central Kitchen announced it was pausing all operations in Gaza as a result of this latest attack, but seemed to give Israel's claims that one of the employees was involved in the October 7th operation the benefit of the doubt. Journalist and filmmaker Layla Al-Arian, who has been on this program several times, noted on Twitter, quote, "As Gaza starves, I am trying to understand the logic behind World Central Kitchen pausing operations. Continuing the starvation of the people of Gaza is presumably the intention behind attacking a record number of aid workers. So pausing operations is exactly what Israel wants." Israel killed at least 2 more journalists this week in Gaza, bringing the number to 192, according to the Gaza government media office. On Saturday, Mamdouh Ibrahim Kuneta was shot in the head in the courtyard of the Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital by an Israeli drone. Kuneta worked as a journalist and editor at the Al-Aqsa TV channel. On Sunday, Maysara Salah was shot and killed by Israeli forces, according to his colleagues at Quds News Network. We've published many features on the Electronic Intifada in the last week, but we wanted to highlight excerpts of this one by Donya Ahmad Abu Sitta about how she organized a special day for the nearly 3 dozen 5-year-olds she teaches in a kindergarten in Khan Younis. Lubna writes, quote, "It was World Children's Day, and I figured that even if the world has forgotten Gaza's children, we have not. It's not an official kindergarten, of course. Israel's genocidal aggression on Gaza has seen 95% of Gaza's schools destroyed or damaged, with at least 87% needing significant reconstruction, according to the UN, before they can be used again. No, our kindergarten is a room in a house that was once a home, my grandmother's home to be exact. It has not escaped damage. Wood and zinc sheets have replaced walls to give shelter from the weather, but the structure is still sound and my grandmother's relatives still live on the second floor. We welcome children from the area only. Parents remain fearful of anything resembling a long journey, so we take who we can from nearby. In this, our imperfect haven, we try to keep a sense of education going for these young children and to provide care for their psychological well-being. All of these kids suffer some trauma or another. One has lost both her parents. Another, Yusuf, has a father who had to have both legs amputated after being injured in a bombing. All of them have lost loved ones. 20 of them have been displaced from their homes elsewhere in Gaza and are now living in tents. I had to make my way to the eastern borders of Khan Younis, where there is a shop from which I could buy some canned foods, sugar, and flour. I paid from my personal savings, money I had set aside over years of hard work. I prepared simple treats, thyme pastries, savory meat pies, and some cheese pastries, and my brother arranged with a nearby baker to have them freshly baked at 8 a.m. so the children could savor them warm when they came. I also made some sweets and gave them to the children as little gifts. I had tried to find toys for them, but none were available in local markets that barely carry basic food supplies, let alone anything non-essential. I woke up early to prepare the classroom. I hung colorful drawings, posters about children's rights, and a map of Palestine on the classroom wall. I set up supplies on the tables, played uplifting music, and created a special corner with a decorated wooden frame in which the kids could be photographed. As they arrived, I greeted them one by one with a smile and a hug. Their laughter boomed around the room where they had discovered the treats, the pastries, and the festive decorations. We sat together, joking and playing, capturing countless beautiful moments that will forever be etched in my heart. My students are young souls who deserve nothing but joy. They should not have to bear the weight of war on their innocent hearts. Those are excerpts from Lubna Ahmad Abu Sitta's feature, The Children the World Forgot, on electronicintifada.net. Finally, as we always do, we wanted to share images of people expressing defiance and resilience in the face of Israel's campaigns of destruction. Photographer Mahmoud Abu Hamda took this image of a girl on a swing. Abu Hamda states, quote, "I saw this swing on a sand hill as I was on my way back from documenting the conditions of displaced people due to the weather storm. I climbed the hill, and before I began documenting the scene, I took a moment to enjoy the happiness of the children and their laughter that filled the place." And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hello again, Nora.
Hi.
Thank you so much for that. It's just we struggle for the words every week. But that story, and speaking to Donya today, and that story by Lubna, just that really lifted my heart. And just to see that, life doesn't stop. I'm not saying that to say that any of this is bearable. It's not. But people don't give up on their children, even in the most dire circumstances. They still want their children to go to school. They still want them to feel that they are loved and safe, and that that people care for them. And people in Gaza are doing their absolute best to do that in circumstances that none of us can imagine. None of us can imagine how we would survive in those circumstances, and they continue. And it's, to me, that's just awe-inspiring and means that none of us have an excuse ever to feel like, oh, we've done enough or we can't do any more. We take care of ourselves, but then we pick ourselves up and we carry on.
It's very important to remember. Thanks, Ali. Well, let's move to the next segment of the show. Earlier, you recorded an interview with Issam Younis of the Mezan Center for Human Rights. Really important work, just incalculably important, that they've been doing for decades across Palestine. And because of the time difference and me being on the West Coast, I wasn't able to join the recording. But set this up for us and let's go to that interview.
Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. The one thing I'll say, and we were so happy Dr. Issam Younis could join us, is that Al-Mezan is one of the oldest Palestinian human rights organizations, and we've relied on it for many, many years, long before this genocide. Their meticulous reporting and documentation of Israel's crimes has been second to none. And their workers, you'll hear Dr. Issam say that every one of them, every family has been displaced multiple times, and yet their workers are still doing this work. And that's the one thing, again, that is just incredible.
Great. Thank you so much. Let's go to that interview, and then we'll be back with John's resistance report, of course, and a discussion about some newsy issues after that.
Reminder, you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream, and I'm Ali Abunimah. We're grateful to be joined now by Dr. Issam Younis. He's the director of Al-Mezan, a Palestinian human rights organization based in Gaza. He's also the former Commissioner General of the Palestinian Independent Commission for Human Rights, and he comes to us now from Cairo, where he has been displaced with his family. Dr. Issam, welcome to the Electronic Intifada live stream.
Thank you so much, Ali. It's a great honor to be with you. I'm very grateful that you invited me and give me the chance to address the very work that we do on the ground in Gaza and the general context of the situation there.
Thank you. It's our honor. Before we get into some of my questions, I just want to ask you how you and your family and your colleagues at Al-Mezan are doing after more than a year of this genocide.
Well, life is not anymore as used to be with this genocidal war that's executed over Gaza since the 7th of October. Our offices, I'll start with the office and Al-Mezan's premises. We have 3 offices in Gaza, actually. And we have some 29 staff in the overall number of staff. 3 offices. The main office is in Gaza City, which has been destroyed severely by attacks in the neighborhood, but still standing. The other 2 offices in Jabalia refugee camp and Rafah city, the 2 were destroyed, together with all of our belongings, documents, and other stuff. Some of our stuff are coincidentally were outside Gaza when the 7th of October outbroke, and the other stuff who are in Gaza, they have displaced many times, maybe 10 times, from a corner to a corner, a tent to a tent. And now all of them, except for 2, I assume, are in the middle area of Gaza, as well as in the Mawasi area, in a very tough conditions, very difficult times, as you know, of the genocidal war, where bombardments everywhere, attacks everywhere. There are no safe haven in Gaza, accompanied with the the deterioration of humanitarian situation due to using food and starvation as a weapon against Gaza. But still, they can do their work to some extent. The priority is the safety of them and their families, and then comes work. To be honest, so we have fieldwork unit, fieldwork staff who document on daily basis violations, which are too much on the plate actually. Uh, and we have lawyers, legal aid unit, who provide free of charge legal aid and who also take the cases and follow detention cases, people who were detained or disappeared during the last year in Gaza. And the rest of the work is also being done there. So the stuff is, most of them are in Gaza. And we have evacuated, me and my family, almost now a year. I'm a cancer survivor, so I need medication. That's part of the wise, and was, in Gaza. Uh, uh, Cancer treatment is a mission impossible in the best case scenario. And now the whole health system has been destroyed by the occupation forces, by Israel. So now we are in Cairo together with the family, and the other staff also are here in Gaza, some staff, and we can do our work from Cairo in coordination with our staff in Gaza.
Well, the conditions are horrible, but their work is so
Very.
important, and I'm so happy to hear they can continue. So let's talk about some of the recent news. Last month, after a long delay of 6 months, the International Criminal Court in The Hague finally issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. In a joint statement with other Palestinian human rights groups, your group, Al-Mezan, called this a historic and pivotal moment in the battle against Israel's impunity, in which the Palestinian people have been denied justice and subjugated for decades under a genocidal settler colonial apartheid regime. End quote. But on 27th of November, France seems to have announced that Netanyahu enjoys immunity from arrest because Israel is not a member of the ICC, effectively reassuring the Israeli leader that France will not arrest him. This came just a day after the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire was announced, and it appears to be the price France was willing to pay to be included in the monitoring committee for that ceasefire. What's your reaction to the French decision, and how do you see the response of other countries to these arrest warrants? Are you confident that other countries will respect the court's order to arrest Netanyahu and Gallant or any other Israelis who may be indicted by the court?
Well, I hope so. I hope the international legal system, its orders to be respected. It's either or. By the end of the day, it's either the rule of law or the rule of the jungle. And to go back a little bit, the issue of accountability and the ICC. I mean, the court, the ICC, has decided to establish the investigation on March 2021. Since that time until today, no step has been taken. No 1 millimeter have been, taken by the court vis-a-vis victims in that part of the world. It's quite chronic. The key word in Palestine is accountability. Israel has never been accountability, enjoys impunity, and this could give just part of the whys. Why 5 or 6 wars over Gaza? On 2008, 2009, then 2012, then 2014, 2021, and then 2023. And the story did not yet end. I mean, why is this? Because Israel feels accountable above the law, as long as many provide legal and political cover to Israel in different manifestations, whether in the Security Council, different UN political bodies or here and there. In addition, the bilateral engagement with Israel that gives Israel this feeling that they cannot be subjected to law. So it was quite chronic. Imagine someone, his home was destroyed on 29, and then rebuilt it, and has been again destroyed by Israeli warplanes in 2012, and in 2014 a family member was killed, and never been repaired or redressed, or Israel was accountable for its practices, its actions. What to do then? The only way is to utilize this civilized mechanism established by civilized nations, which is mandated to look into such cases. We're talking about violations of the Rome Statute, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and the crime of aggression. Palestinians have utilized up to the maximum the Israeli legal system. In 2014, in the aftermath of that escalation, that war over Gaza, that resulted in the killings of hundreds and destroying of again hundreds of or thousands of housing units and infrastructure. In the aftermath of the war, some 500 complaints have been submitted by human rights organizations to the Israeli military advocate general to investigate those crimes or those claims. We're talking about the very serious cases where whole families have been erased, whole multi-story buildings were destroyed on top of those who were living there, and finally it has resulted in no single criminal investigation has been opened by the military advocate general. And I think it's only 3 cases that were a criminal investigation was opened, which were more discipline-based cases. For example, a theft of a credit card by a soldier or so, while war crimes
So
and crimes of humanity has not been added. So the new or the arrest warrants by the court that was approved and sanctioned by the free trade chamber, I think that definitely it's a history, and it's a starting point to put an end for accountability, and those war criminals who ordered or executed the genocide and war crimes over Gazans and civilians in Gaza to be brought to justice. It's just a starting point, and I think governments under legal obligation to do so, members of the court, those who ratified the Rome Statute, Europe in general, and other countries should respect this order. Now, France, by doing so, I think France now, and before France, statement, for example, made by the German foreign minister, it looks like they are establishing a new international law. If you make a comparison between statements delivered by the France when arrest warrants issued for President Putin, and how they were keen, encouraging other members to respect those orders. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, how they reacted to the warrants against Gallant and Netanyahu, it's really shocking and cannot be at all justified. And France should be ashamed of this. Here is the double standards. Here is utilizing law for pure utilitarian international law, and it prejudices the internationally accepted standards, human rights, IHL, but also it prejudices dramatically international and regional peace and security of what's going on there.
Well, it's very clear in a way the double standards that these countries, France, even the US, which isn't a member of the court, were so willing to use the court as a political weapon against Putin. But as soon as Israel is charged in this historic decision, they're looking for excuses and for ways to escape from their obligations. But following the announcement of the arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territories, wrote, "In this rare moment of euphoria, I want to acknowledge the innumerable victims of too many wars in Gaza and the indomitable work of Palestinian human rights organizations, the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, Al-Haq, Al-Mezan, Al-Damir, and Defense for Children International Palestine." Albanese added that without the work of these groups, the hope brought about by the ICC decision would not have come. In mainstream media, Dr. Issam, the work done by Palestinian human rights groups is often ignored or dismissed. Can you talk about the role specifically that Palestinian human rights defenders are playing both in the International Criminal Court, which we were just talking about, and also the International Court of Justice, where, of course, South Africa brought its genocide case against Israel? What role do Palestinian organizations and Palestinian human rights defenders, including, of course, Al-Mezan, play in bringing these cases forward?
Well, it was and still the main issue for the Palestinian human rights organizations. It's item one on our agenda. Back again to what I just said regarding accountability. Accountability is the issue, is the matter for Palestinians. You know, Gaza is an occupied territory before and after Oslo, before and after the unilateral disengagement by Israel in September 2005, and definitely before and after the taking over of Gaza by Hamas. So international law should apply. Civilians in Gaza are protected under international law. However, we have seen this, perpetration of very serious grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions, war crimes against humanity, which now is culminated by genocide. And by the way, the genocide is retroactively being perpetrated against the Palestinians, not only in the Nakba, but I mean in the aftermath of that. And according to the Genocide Convention, genocide could be perpetrated in terms of peace as well as in terms of war. It's not a matter, I mean, number of those who've been killed or number of houses they were destroyed. It's subjecting whole community to unprecedented conditions and to destroy the community in part or in whole. So accountability is an issue. And Palestinians all the years long, all decades long, have this feeling that justice is in enmity with them. It has never been closer to them, even with just one millimeter. I mean, no one now would claim that she or he did not see what happened in the occupied territories, in Jerusalem and West Bank area, sea settlements, settlers, terrorism, Gaza being under blockade for 16 years. They have been subjected to wars where children, women have been killed. Society have been destroyed. So accountability is an issue. That was the main concern for us. Again, we utilize the Israeli system. There is no chance to go through the system, to pursue justice through the Israeli legal system. There were many amendments. Amendment number 8 of 2012 of state liability law made it mission impossible for victims, Gazans, to pursue justice through the system. And if you cannot pursue it through and the Israeli system, by the way, is the only system that I know that boycotts the victims. Usually victims in other situations could boycott the system, claiming that it's biased, it's not independent. But in case of Israel, it's the system that boycotts the victims. Then where to go? So we deeply involved. We are human rights organizations that are part of our work. The core part of our work is documentation, monitoring. So we did a lot of work. That's our main task. And in 2009, the aftermath of the first war in Gaza, we approached the office of the prosecutor of the ICC at that time. Luis Ocampo was the prosecutor, asking him to open investigation. State of Palestine also asked him to open investigation of the atrocities, of the crimes that were committed in Palestine. And 2 years later, he just made it public that he cannot open the investigation because the legal status of Palestine is not clear. First, from I mean, by the three main bodies, the Security Council of the United Nations, the General Assembly of the United Nations, as well as the General Assembly of the state parties of the ICC. So he concluded that an investigation cannot be opened. Palestine is not a state. So Palestine became a state in later stage of 2012. We have white smoke, where we could have state personality, accede to international instruments. So one of those instruments that was signed by the state of Palestine was the Rome Statute. The court accepted that, so Palestine became a member to that court. So there is here an avenue for victims to pursue justice, to have sort of redress, and to ensure that crimes, who committed the crimes, to be accountable for the crimes. And we engage with the court since that time until today. We have submitted many submissions to the court, different submissions on killings, blockade over Gaza, settlements, and so on. Many submissions. This is in the preliminary investigation period, until it was culminated when Fatah Ben-Suda decided to open investigation, and then went to the pre-trial chamber to approve that, and to approve the jurisdiction of the court over the state of Palestine in West Bank and Gaza, and was decided. Then the investigation was opened at that time. So the court is it's the last resort for victims, and finally we have those warrants that are quite important and significant. We hope it will be a starting point, because there are only two. There are, I mean, the whole system, the military and the security, they are involved in those crimes of that has been enlisted in the Rome Statute. Now the ICJ is a different mechanism, and as you know, it's state-based mechanism of arbitration.
Yeah. So just to clarify, the International Criminal Court criminally charges individuals like Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. The International Court of Justice deals with states only, so it doesn't accuse or judge individuals, and that's where South Africa very famously is charging the state of Israel with genocide. And in January last year, the court issued provisional measures which say that Israel is there is a plausible case that Israel is committing genocide, and Israel has to stop all of the actions that could constitute genocide. But in terms of the ICJ, and in terms of in terms of the work that Al-Mezan and other Palestinian human rights groups have been doing in supporting these cases, and that includes gathering documentation and legal materials and affidavits and witness testimonies that you've been doing for years. In October of 2021, Israel declared Al-Haq and the Palestinian Center for Human Rights and Ad-Damir and Defense for Children International, among, I think there was another group as well. And these are all very internationally respected human rights defenders and human rights organizations. But the state of Israel declared to be terrorist organizations. You know, obviously, any such declaration by Israel is ridiculous and has no validity. What's it like to be in a field where Israel, in fact, as we know, defines any human rights organization, even journalists, even doctors, and I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, as terrorist organizations. What's your reaction to that? And was this because of the work that groups like Al-Mezan and Al-Haq and others, your colleagues, that are part of the Palestinian human rights community, are doing with the court? What was their motivation in trying to designate human rights groups, as terrorist organizations?
The Israeli government has decided, took a clear-cut decision that when it comes to accountability and pursuing justice in Palestine, there is zero tolerance. So we've been subjected to smear campaigns against Mizan, PCHR, Haq, and other human rights organizations. Some of them has been classified to be, terrorist organizations. While talking about Al-Haq is the oldest, not only Palestinian human rights, but also the oldest Arab human rights, with very respected and history of real work in human rights. And the same with the other organizations. We are not political organizations, but when it comes to accountability, again, there is zero tolerance. That's why the whole strategy was intended or aimed to delegitimize our work, delegitimization. Anti-occupation as anti-Semitism, anti-occupation is terrorism, anti-occupation is, and defunding. Not only we as entities have been attacked and still being attacked, but also, our partners who are governments, the EU and others also have been incited against. So we know this. It's part of how they do it, and as you know, it's how they abuse the whole situation. And again, and anti-occupation is anti-Semitic, not only by Palestinians, but those intellectuals, students, the American universities or wherever. The ICC, the minute it has decided to launch investigation and then issued warrants, it became an anti-Semite court. Imagine that. So it's there all the time. So it gives us, to be honest, more power, more energy to continue our work, which means that we are on the right side of history. We're doing our professional work. We are not political organizations. We are not affiliated with any political organization. We are just human rights organizations, and enjoys respect from different parties. We're members of different UN systems as well as other networks in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
But again, as long as accountability is the issue, and Netanyahu is a war criminal and Gallant is a war criminal, definitely they will do their best to ensure that they will never be brought to justice. And what's going on there, the others should understand it as self-defense, all the time blaming the victim. When Palestinians are being killed, I mean, we are now talking about 44,300 civilians. I mean, the Palestinians were killed. And again, they are to be blamed because they have been used as human shields. Imagine this. And Gaza was put under blockade. And I think it's here interesting. The 3 decades of giving peace a chance has resulted in this harvest of sins. Gaza, I mean, Palestinians, on the one hand, which is the unified nation, have been transferred to be into communities. Community of Gaza, isolated from the rest of the occupied territories, put under conditions and under problems created by the occupation: sewage, access, electricity, food, and this stuff. Jerusalem is also isolated from the rest of the occupied territories, drawn with its problems created by the occupation, discriminatory laws, Arnona, apartheid, and so on. South of West Bank settlers, violence. North of West Bank settlers, expansion. So this is the fragmentation of the geography and the demography has been made by Israel. And Gaza was put under blockade, unprecedented since 1967. And the blockade is not only a collective punishment that's outlawed under international law. There is a process of de-development, as if you are taking Gaza and throw it backward 60 or 70 years back in history, sieging the future of a whole nation. This has been taking place while others watching this. Different actors, Europe, the United States, and Palestinians, human rights, rules of international law has been sacrificed with, and that has resulted with this situation. That's why, I mean, we as human rights organizations do the human rights work, and we have very strict measures, professionally speaking. I mean, meeting the victims, eyewitnesses, how to prepare a file, and it's really work that has been done professionally. That's why the court usually take those works and reports by the human rights organizations as credible organizations. And I mean, finally, if they consider it as claims, then let's say it's claims, and it's the court. We
Yeah.
accept the court, accept its mandate, and just to come and investigate those practices. But Israel, as you know, trying on the one hand, crack down those human rights organizations, not only Palestinian but also international organizations on the one hand. On the other hand, it's the only conflict, by the way. I'm talking about the war now over Gaza, the genocidal war on Gaza, that the media is not there, international media. It's being banned by Israel. Karim Khan, the prosecutor of the ICC, was not allowed to enter Gaza. The Francesca Albanese, the special rapporteur, not only her, but also John Dugard and Richard Falk and Michael Link, all of them, I mean, the special rapporteurs in the last 10 or so years, also have denied access to Gaza. Investigation commissions established by the United Nations, by the Human Rights Council, were denied access to Gaza. So history did not begin on the 7th. It's before that. And I mean, if they cannot come to Gaza, then our mission is to bring Gaza to their desks there in The Hague, in New York, in Geneva. And finally, we do professional work. Israel knows deeply, inherently, that they perpetrated war crimes, and that's why they do not tolerate any investigation, any human rights work, any criticism of their performance in the occupied territory.
And I can certainly identify with what you're saying, because we here at the Electronic Intifada are called all sorts of names. I personally was banned from entering Germany because they say that I'll incite public disorder or anti-Semitism or I don't know what. And just like you say, these attacks, these smears, these lies, whether they come from Israel or from its supporters, they only encourage and motivate us. So I'm glad to hear the same from you. And I'm also can attest to the great care that Al-Mezan and your colleagues always take in terms of documenting any event in Gaza. We always know that the documentation that we will get from Al-Mezan will be extremely high quality and extremely precise. And that's exactly why Israel sees you as such a great danger. So let's talk a little bit about some of these crimes that you're documenting. Just for example, last week, Al-Mezan said that Israeli forces have escalated their deliberate attacks on medical personnel and health facilities in Gaza, with the latest wave of attacks concentrated on Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia in the north of Gaza. And on November 21st, an Israeli drone strike, this is just one example, injured 2 pregnant women as they exited Al-Aqsa Hospital, also in northern Gaza. The next day, an Israeli drone targeted Kamal Adwan Hospital's emergency entrance while medical staff were attending to wounded patients, injuring 4 healthcare workers. And Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital, was himself seriously injured in an Israeli attack, and his 15-year-old son Ibrahim was killed by a quadcopter. And of course, we know that since the beginning of this genocide, hundreds of medical personnel have been killed. So we know that Israel has no red lines, no respect for any of the what is supposed to be the rules of war. What can you tell us? I know that it's a vast topic, so just in take this how you want to. What can you tell us about the nature and scope of the abuses that you are documenting in Gaza right now? Is it more of what we've seen over the last few decades, which is already horrific, or are we seeing something that is qualitatively different in terms of the scale and nature of the crimes that Israel is committing?
Absolutely. It's qualitatively different from what already had been documented and seen on daily basis. We discover, I don't know, those unbelievable atrocities. First of all, it's part of genocide that's being executed over Palestinians in Gaza. Gaza is 360 square kilometers. On the eve of 7th of October, the density of population was 6,019 person per kilometer. And now when people were ordered to evacuate, to be displaced many times from the north, the south, and eastern Gaza, they are now concentrated in the middle area as well as in Khan Younis, Mawasi area. And the density is more than 45,000 in such inhuman situation. It's not adapted for living. It's not living areas. It's or in urban areas. It's more agricultural areas, areas close to the sea with sand hills, but not populated areas. So it lacks the most all services actually. The Mawasi area, and then being targeted, being attacked, and we have documented many cases where the Israelis bombarded in the heart of those areas, in the heart of the very, very dense populated area on the globe. The genocide is there and manifested in the daily killings of civilians, destruction of property, the wiping out of whole quarterhoods, whole cities. What's going on in the north at the moment for the last 2 months is ethnically cleanse and destroy the north, accompanied by, conferences, statements made by the some Israeli ministers, Israeli Knesset members, that they will resettle in Gaza, especially in the north, and this is a question. So they are cleaning, wiping out, obliterating the whole area, and the north used to be some 250,000 to 300,000 inhabitants there. Now the number has been dramatically reduced to some 70,000, living in very difficult conditions, being attacked on daily basis, but also
when you, Dr. Issam, I'm sorry to interrupt. When you say the north, that there are 70,000, do you include Gaza City in that, or you're talking about the area north of Gaza City?
I'm talking about the northern part of Gaza, which is Jabalia refugee camp, Nazla, Beit Lahia.
And do you have a sense? And do you have a sense of Gaza City in general, what the population remaining there is? I know that nobody can be very precise, but from your knowledge, how many people remain north of the so-called Netzarim corridor?
It's around 250,000, because 250 to 300. Because 2 million now are concentrated in the middle area, Nusayrat, mainly Deir al-Balah, and in Khan Younis. So the rest are in Gaza and the north, 70,000 in the north area, and in Gaza City some 250,000.
And what about Rafah?
Rafah is not anymore. All people are there, all residents and displaced to Rafah have been ordered to evacuate, ordered to leave, and the city has been, completely destroyed. We receive on daily basis some pictures and videos, shocking videos of the large scale destruction that has been perpetrated by Israel alongside the borders, what's so-called Philadelphia route through all the way along the borders with Egypt. The whole area has been obliterated. Hundreds, thousands of homes for more than 1 kilometer. Uh, uh, 1 kilometer in width, and then some 14 kilometers. But the whole town has been destroyed. Tel Sultan, Saudi neighborhood, Shabura, and Jenin, all has been almost destroyed.
So that's Rafah, which was one of the biggest. Of course, Gaza is not a big territory, but Rafah was one of the larger cities in Gaza. And we were told before the destruction of Rafah, and Rafah has been largely destroyed and depopulated, as you say, we were told prior to that Rafah is a red line. We were told that by the United States, by Canada, by European governments who've all been coming to our region to lecture us and teach us about human rights. And many of these countries even fund human rights organizations in Palestine. But without exception, these governments, when I talk about North America, the US, Canada, the European Union, without exception, they are complicit, if not full partners in this genocide. What I want to ask you is, what do you say to them when you meet representatives of these governments? How do you confront their hypocrisy, the fact that they say every day Rafah is a red line, or ethnic cleansing is, and they don't enforce anything, and they even come back and they say that Netanyahu has immunity? What's it like to talk to representatives of these governments? It must be very frustrating.
Absolutely. I mean, all the time we start our talk with shame on you. Our time in Palestine is being counted by the corpse of children, a glass of water, and a bill of medicine. And we still not only tolerate what's going on, tolerate genocide that executed over civilians who are protected under international law, but you are directly complicit on the genocide over Gaza. I mean, Gaza's being killed by explosives that are from the United States or other parts, Germany or Canada or others. It's not a secret, and it did not stop. So far, arms shipments are being facilitated to Israel, so they are part of the genocide that's being executed over the second. Other ways of engaging with Israel. I mean, talking about trade or association agreements with Israel, like the EU, still being enforced, while Article 2 of the agreement that was signed between the EU and Israel, respect to the human rights, is one of the conditions. And even before genocide over Gaza, reports from the different commissions, Goldstone report, Francesca's reports, and others' reports show clearly that human rights is not only not being respected, but it has been, thrown some way, like toilet papers. They deal with the human rights instruments. So we say that it would make clear that, to be honest, it's not. First of all, it's not a conflict, and it's not a war. It's occupier vis-a-vis occupied. Palestinians are living in such unprecedented situation since 100 years. To survive in 67 when they occupied the rest of what has been left of Palestine, called West Bank and Gaza Strip, as an occupied territory. To understand what's going on, I think it's became clear the war in Gaza is actually unveiling rather than initiating, creating, unveiling this very serious chronic problem of the international world order and the whole international justice system. We're talking about two cultures. superior culture that only produces rationality, human rights, democracy, which is superior. The other one, which I mean, Judeo-Christian culture, if you want, and the other culture, which is inferior, which we belong to, is only produces, ISIS, sort of dehumanized us. So that would give sort of why they tolerate the killings of babies. I'm not talking about children. We have a case, we documented the case where a baby who is his age is 6 hours and has been injured by one of those bombardments of Israel. I mean, it has been tolerated. No one is doing it. I mean, to put an end for what's going to stop the war, to have a ceasefire. They can easily force Israel to do so. So this, I mean, superior and inferior cultures, and the inferior culture is surplus on humanity, and those who belong to that culture is definitely surplus on the humanity. And now we do have the right to understand it that way. I mean, it's more than a year, it's 14 months. Children, women, and no one would claim that she or he did not see what's going on. It's unprecedented. It's the only crime that's being broadcasted live on TV. So no one would claim that he or she did not see what's going on. Talking about crime of genocide, the mother of the crimes. So they are complicit. They are part of the problem, and I think this uh, uh, would definitely prejudice peace and security in the region and globally speaking. And if we go back to I mean, when the League of Nations was established in 1919, 1920, lasted for 26 years. Those victorious of the war met in Versailles and have the Charter of the League of the Nations. The main themes, the main goals is to ensure, to maintain peace and security, and second, to settle down conflicts by diplomatic means. It could not stop the invasion of Japan to Manchuria and China, or the bombardment of Ethiopia by Italy, or to stop the Second World War. So it dissolved. And we have a new victorious in 45, met in San Francisco and have the Charter of the United Nations. Cut and paste, peace and security, and then it could not stop Srebrenica's genocide, genocide in Rwanda, and genocide in Palestine now, and the atrocities in Vietnam, in Algeria, and I think the whole world order should be reconsidered. I mean, those who have a monopoly, 5 countries, could decide on the destiny of countries to send them to hell or to heaven, as simple as that. And on the other hand, countries, governments with very rich civilizations never colonized others. And by the way, those who met in San Francisco, who have drafted the United Nations Charter, were colonizing half of the globe. And they are talking about peace and justice, and they are colonizing at that time half of the globe. So imagine this. So I think it's time. It's a moment of the truth that what's going on is very serious, and I mean, the priority now is to stop this, to end the war, to end the ceasefire, and to be clear that Palestinians have the full right, based on the advisory opinion of the ICJ by I mean, for example, which is, I believe, is very significant. The July advisory opinion is really significant. I think it's worth to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, and we just have a couple of minutes, but that's the opinion that was issued in July by the International Court of Justice, which declared that Israel's occupation in itself is illegal, and that was the first time that they declared that, rather than just Israel's actions in the context of the occupation being illegal. The occupation is illegal in itself. Dr. Issam, we clearly have a lot more to talk about, so we would like to invite you back at some point soon, I hope, to cover more of these topics. But it was important to us to highlight the work that Al-Mezan and the other organizations, the prominent Palestinian organizations, are doing, because you have played a really crucial, quiet role behind the scenes, largely, in terms of pushing the international Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice to take up their responsibilities. And I know that many of the people who are watching feel a little bit cynical sometimes. They say, well, the ICC is not going to result in anything, or the ICJ is not going to result in anything. But as you yourself said, the arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant are historic. They are only the start. There is much more to be done. And we're grateful to you and your colleagues for doing that really important work. So I really want to thank you for joining us today, and hope that we can have you back on another occasion soon.
I'm delighted and honored to be with you, Ali, with the Electronic Intifada. It's a great honor and pleasure. And I hope that I covered the issues that should be covered. There are a lot to talk about, but I fully agree and second what you just said, that the way the road to justice is very, very lengthy, and it cannot be achieved by one blow. It's by points, and the victim should all the time keep on. It's the only choice that he has. He don't. I mean, we don't have the luxury to say yes or no. We are still, even with all what's happening, we're still optimistic, and because we are on the right side of history, and we feel strong as long as there are others who cares. Definitely, we thought that we share with the we know with those governments the basic principles of humanity, to discover that the issue killings of children is still being debated and negotiable. That many children can be killed. I mean, this is really disgusting, and they should be ashamed of what they are doing. But we are on the right side of history, and we keep on justice for all, and human rights for all, and we are human beings who deserve also to enjoy those principles that have been all the time highlighted by civilized nations.
Thank you. That's a perfect way to put it. And we're very grateful for the work you and your colleagues are doing. And we wish safety to all of the staff of Al-Mezan and their families. And we hope for an end to this horror very, very soon. Thank you again, Dr. Issam. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Ali. Extraordinary analysis by Dr. Issam. I mean, just the level of like patient, meticulous documentation that Al-Mezan and other human rights organizations who have, been around for decades doing the work, coming under attack by Israeli forces, storming, whether it's storming their offices in Ramallah and the West Bank, putting them on, terrorist lists, or attacking them deliberately, doing their field work and their research in Gaza. It's and they keep doing it, and the level of documentation, just listening to him speak and talk about the way that the field researchers operate and the level of documentation that they are committed to doing in order for all of this to be handed to whatever shred of international courts of justice are left. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, it is, and it was important for us to let people know about the work of Al-Mezan and Al-Haq. We've had, of course, Ahmed Abu Fool from Al-Haq on before. That these organizations, they're not doing glamorous work, they're not in the limelight, but it is largely due to the persistence of these Palestinian organizations that there is any movement at all at the ICC or the ICJ, and I just wanted people to really know that.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. Wonderful. Okay, let's bring Jon on for the resistance report. Hey, Jon.
Hey guys, great job. It's great to hear from Donya and the Abu Sitta family. Just that those schools, having those kindergartens functioning while Israel tries to dismantle the education system, and you hear from Donya and her sister and their family, and that's the resistance. They don't allow themselves to be erased like Israel intends. The medical system does the same thing. Yeah, and also the field researchers. You're totally right. I worked with field researchers in Gaza, and they're just, quietly, heroically, registering this appalling situation that I can't believe we're still talking about.
425 days. Yeah. Well, since we last saw you, there has been, as you say, an uneven ceasefire. It's there, it seems very tenuous at this point, and in Lebanon, and meanwhile, the resistance is still going strong in Gaza and in the West Bank. But tell us what you're going to be focusing on.
Yeah, well, we got operations from the south, from Rafah and from Jabalia. And then, I couldn't think of the right word to use, uneven for ceasefire. Israel has very unique ceasefires that allow them to continue firing. But it's typical of their exceptionalism in all of these cases. So we'll get into that.
Great. Thanks so much, John. Take it away.
Let's do it. All right. So as Dr. Issam said, all throughout Gaza, the situation is brutal. We're going to focus on the maps here off the top just to give people a grasp of what we're talking about. We're going to talk about operations in Rafah in the very far south, all the way up to Jabalia, which is still under siege now, 60 days on in the north. So if we focus in, I just wanted to bring a couple facts to people here. The World Health Organization this week said that 90% of Gaza's population are living in tents. And that was an intentional policy that the Israeli military has been carrying out to destroy the shelters and burn them. And just as someone who follows their field reports, I just want to say that they talk about that in their field reports, dismantling the schools, burning the shelters, attacking the schools where people were taking shelter. That has been a systematic policy since the summer that they have been talking about within their internal field reports. And it's the same with the starvation as a weapon of war. On Army radio this week, a major general said that the kidnapped in Gaza, the captives, the soldiers, are starving, he said. They said that the IDF assessed to the political echelon, conveyed this assessment to the political echelon. The assessments from the Major General are growing with us, with the military, about the deteriorating situation of the abductees, including the starvation of some of them. There is a problem of accessibility to groceries in the Strip. I can tell you that some of the abductees are in very serious danger, and there's a risk to their lives. So the Israeli military is very clear about what they're doing, and they're sending a signal to the political echelon that the starvation policy is maybe going to impact the captives as well, which is I just found that to be such a stark, especially after you hear Dr. Issam talk about all the systematic way that this has been approached, the starvation, for the Israeli military to point out that their captive soldiers are going to starve as well. I just wanted to bring people that. So operations in Rafah, we have been talking about Rafah since May, but we haven't talked about it much lately. I brought it up on the show last week because it appeared in the field reports over the past 2 weeks. And I just want to point out this field report from November 22nd. Qassam fighters were able to carry out a complex operation against enemy soldiers and vehicles near Burj Awad Junction in Rafah City a short while ago. Our fighters spotted a number of occupation soldiers in the area and successfully sniped 3 of them with Al-Qassam's Al-Ghul rifle and confirmed the death of 2 soldiers for certain. As soon as a Zionist Merkava tank arrived to rescue them, it was targeted with a Yasin 105 shell and caught fire. After that, our fighters spotted a military bulldozer advancing to pull out the burning tank and targeted it with a Yasin 105 shell. Our fighters also spotted a helicopter landing to evacuate. So that was the field report that I brought you last week. And I just want to highlight that as the fidelity to the field reports, how accurate the Qassam field reports are compared to the Israeli ones that say, we killed 100 people today, we killed 100 fighters, we killed 60 fighters, just absurd numbers that don't match any kind of on-the-ground reality. And you get a Qassam report like that on November 22nd. Qassam could write these field reports and say anything, but they don't. They write an accurate field report. So let's watch this first video here, and we're going to set up what that description of that operation was. This is called Operation Avenging Sinwar. And this commander is going to describe the operation here, which is this is a 4-stage ambush, part 1 of a set of 3 ambushes that are derived in Rafah. Remember, the Rafah brigade we were told they were defeated in August. Yahya Sinwar was killed in Rafah, in Tel Sultan. And this operation by the Rafah Brigade, you can see there, 11:22. So this is the video from that field report from weeks ago. So the commander says, after monitoring the movement and behavior of the enemy forces, the decision was made by the command of the Eastern Battalion of the Rafah Brigade to equip a series of complex and tight ambushes in the targeted operational zone. You can see it there on the screen. Fire will be opened up by Issam. So he talks about 3 elements of this. And this is, I believe, you're looking there at the Egyptian border. So that's the Philadelphia corridor that they're showing right there. So they're monitoring the troops, the Israeli troops coming along the Philadelphia corridor. And that's the purpose of the Philadelphia corridor, to allow the Israelis to move inside into the central areas of the territory more effectively, so they can jump off in this way. So they've been monitoring this. And Qassam says there's 3 elements, and they name the fighters, which is interesting. They haven't really, I don't believe they've ever done that before, said the fighters' names. Hussam, Khalid, and Walid are in on these operations, and each of them are team leaders of a squad. So they're pointing out this operation, setting it up. Again, we see command and control. We see things that we were told didn't exist. The Rafah Brigade fighting. And the commander says, we will avenge the blood of our great leader, the great martyr, Yahya Sinwar, Abu Ibrahim, who was killed fighting on the land of the Rafah Brigade. And so now we're seeing the operation here. Again, we've taken out the audio out of this operation, but the fighter says, we see their movements moving into the area. Now we see the vehicles. So this is exactly what they set up and exactly what is supposed to happen here. So number 2, is this number 2? Yeah, so number 2, who have Hussam, the sniper, he's set up. Again, we see proper technique. He's completely inside the building. I've edited the motion of these soldiers, but you can see these soldiers are moving across the land. And this is the sniping operation that was accurately described in the field report. I have edited out the dropping of the soldiers to match YouTube community guidelines. But if you want to see the full videos, you can go to my Twitter account as ever and see the uncensored versions. We have to keep these strictly edited to adhere to YouTube guidelines, which we do. If you're listening, YouTube, we do. So these are this is the sniper's operation. Maybe we can loop it back and just take a look at the setup that Hussam has here. He's up on top of the wardrobe. He's up on top of the furniture. He's completely inside the building. His muzzle's not hanging out of the building like we see the Israelis doing all the time. And he is sniping those soldiers that in the video are moving. In this, we have it as a still, just to keep the thrust of the operation in to meet the YouTube standards. So yeah, number 3, so that's Hussam. Now Khalid's motion, his unit is waiting for the movement of the armored vehicles predicted by their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance and target acquisition. And here they go. We got a cameraman, and we have, I call them a helmet cam, but people point out that there's no helmets, and you're right, it's just on their heads. But you can see the tank barrel moving directly over to presumably Khalid, at least Khalid's team. And you can see, again, just the courage of these operations, the tank barrel. We're going to see that multiple times. We saw it on the last image during the sniper operation. The tank barrel is pointed straight at these fighters. And so that's Khalid and his Archer squad. Again, we don't see the trophy system enable in that. And now here's Walid cutting off the D9 armored bulldozer that comes to pull out the tank that has been hit and is burning. Where the fighters don't stick around to watch the burning because they're trying to return to their base safely to fight another day. These are not martyrdom operations, as we have pointed out throughout this entire battle. I showed you this last week, the two-person crew inside the D9 armored bulldozer made by Caterpillar in the United States, Peoria, Illinois, on the BDS list. There's two in the cabin. You can see a direct hit on the cabin. There's two crew in the cabin. They sit side by side. They're like a little bit, the driver's sunken down and the commander's up a bit higher. But a direct hit in the same operation. These videos are parsed out all from the same Operation Avenging Sinwar. And now we're going to see number 5 here. This is an F7 fragmentation warhead. So this is an anti-personnel warhead. And you can see the distance here. They're going to focus in on, they're going to count the triangles, and the fighter in the audio counts the triangles. You can see their legs in the stairs. You can't see anything other than that for YouTube. So this fits. So he counts out the 7 soldiers that are going into this building, and the fighters are trained in on the building. And now the distance of this, some people asked about the distance of this. So I did a calculation of the sound wave, both of frame by frame and a calculation of the sound wave. And this is a 194 meter shot, which is the outer limit of the effective range of this weapon, and it's a dead-on bullseye shot by that fighter. So Walid's unit is impressive archers, 194.38 meters. It's a pretty remarkable shot there. And then this last number 6 is they announce coming soon, because this is ambush number 1 of a 3-part series of ambushes in Rafah. There's the medevac helicopter, exactly like the field report said, which is just something that I always like to point out, because just the juxtaposition between the Israelis saying that they killed 1 million fighters every day, and Qassam giving you honest, accurate, like strictly accurate field report when you don't know that a video is coming 2 weeks later in this case. And it does, and it comes, and it's exactly matching what the fighters say. They're not putting out fake field reports to make it seem like they're fighting. These are authentic field reports that are showing accurate scenes from the battle that we see on video shortly after, even though the videos are only a portion of the operations, as Qassam points out all the time, and as you can see in the field reports as well. That videos make up only a small portion of the actual operations that are going on. So that was in Rafah. There's operations, we'll look at the map here, heading up north. Operations again on the Netzarim corridor. The corridor has been widened. I've pointed this out the last few weeks. It's now 7 kilometers wide, and there's continuing clearing operations in Tel Hawa and Zaytun neighborhoods, ethnic cleansing. Dr. Issam said between 250,000 and 400,000 people still living in the north. They're not leaving the north, despite the ethnic cleansing campaign that Israel is carrying out. People are not going through the corridor down to the south. The numbers of that are a handful. They have been that way for 2 months. They haven't changed. People are internally displaced in the north, and these operations continue in Jabalia 60 days on. Of this siege that has been brutal. As Nora pointed out, 2,700 people at least killed already, 10,000 wounded just in the siege of Jabalia, which is an effort to cut off Beit Hanun, which you see there up on the northeast, and opposite to Beit Hanun is Beit Lahia, and the Jabalia camp is north of Jabalia city there. And so they're attempting to cut off the north from Jabalia, from Beit Hanun from Jabalia. Israel's building these corridors in order to cut up the Gaza Strip. This is a long-time Zionist fantasy to cut the Gaza Strip into 5 segments. It's what they did when the settlements were in Gaza, in order to manage the population. And like I said about the Philadelphia corridor, and like we saw in that last operation, the ability to move into the center of the strip and attack upwards from there is a military asset. And this is what Israel has attempted to do in its failure to do anything else in the war, its failure to destroy the 𝐬𝐿 brigades or any of the armed movements, its failure to destroy the Hamas government, its failure to return the captives. All of these operations have been a failure. And what they're doing in place of those military failures is attempt to hold on to these corridors of territory while ethnically cleansing the population. And the effort in Jabalia right now is focused on D9 armored bulldozers, destroying houses on the outer edges and shrinking the area, which has been what has been going on from the Netzarim corridor in Tel El-Hawa and Zaytun, and is happening in Jabalia. So they're on the ground, carefully destroying what is left of Gaza from this 14-month genocide. This is now the 3rd major operation into Jabalia. So let's look at number 7, because it's the D9s that are being targeted, and they're still being hit with appropriate weapons. This is a Sadmia shock device. You can see it hidden under there on the rock, under the cinder block, tracking the bulldozer. You can see a closed circuit television camera here, and that device is detonated. Again, that's a 𝐬𝐿 device. It functions similar to the 𝐓𝐿𝐿, where the shock explodes a shape charge out. And so these are used against bulldozers. They're not used against tanks. And so you see them using appropriate weapons for the vehicles, still 14 months on, still using their own tools that they have made. And again, the field report for this: after returning from our battle lines, our Mujahideen reported that a Zionist military bulldozer of the type D9 was targeted with a shock bomb last Friday, killing those inside. That matched with the Israeli casualty report from that day as well. So again, accurate field reports down to the letter. This operation was December 1st, and the video came out the next day. So they're able to continue to publish these videos promptly. So 14 months on, matching the casualty reports. We can look at number 8 now. This is the second part of that operation. This is the targeting of a tank with a 𝐓𝐿𝐿. You can see the fighter running the wire. The 𝐓𝐿𝐿 is in the building there, and it's placed a distance to allow the shape charge to form before hitting the tank. We've seen them do that when they hand deliver them. They try to put them between 1.5 and 3 meters. You can see the fighter, as soon as he's exposed there, he drops down so he's not seen. It looked a little bit like he was fired on, but he was not. He's just getting out of the way so he can return to his base safely. And again, detonating homemade, 𝐬𝐿-made Gaza industry weapons. Okay, so this next slide, before we go to it, I just want to give you a warning. There's going to be audio of gunfire in this track because I left the audio in. I want you to hear what it sounds like when these guys are fighting. So these are not, I want to show you that what the sound of the battlefield is when these operations are taking place. Again, an elevated Yasin strike, perfectly executed. You can see that the turret of the tank is perpendicular to the shooter, which opens up a wider turret gap on that. And you can just hear the sounds of the battle. These fighters are in the middle of battles. They're not taking pot shots. Here it comes again. And during this operation, you can see the tank barrel is pointed the opposite direction. So more open area for the archer to hit. And during this operation, 𝐬𝐿 also seized quadcopters which has been going on throughout the war, both the terror of the quadcopters and the ability of 𝐓𝐡𝐞 to capture them, GPS spoof them presumably, and land them safely, because they're not being shot out of the sky, they're being landed without scratches. So that is continuing to go on. If we look at number 10, we get another Yasin strike, again out the door. These are a genre that we've been watching for this whole battle, popping out of the alleys. This is in Beit Lahia, but the alleys all over Gaza, all over the West Bank as well, are terror for the Israelis, and a key area of the resistance. Jabalia is the center in many ways of the resistance. It has been since the armed struggle began. I try to point that out all the time. It's the place where the First Intifada began. It's the place where the armed struggle really took off in the 1980s in Jabalia, and it has vexed the Israelis since then. And that's why this is now the third invasion of Jabalia. And each time in December and then in May, and now again, they say that they have dismantled the resistance, and we watch clearly that they haven't. Number 11, Israel released this video because this is them towing their disabled vehicles, and this was their maintenance unit showing off how they tow their destroyed vehicles that are hit. And they use statistics, but they don't tell you the number in their inventory. So they use statistics like 88% of our vehicles are still operating, but they don't tell you how many of those vehicles, because many of those vehicles are M113s, which don't count. And that's how you end up getting these muddled statistics that are just essentially propaganda, because you can't 80% of what? They did the same thing with the rockets in Hezbollah's arsenal by saying, we got rid of 80% of the rockets, but 80% of what number? Because going into the war with Hezbollah, they used the number of 150,000 to 250,000. So is it 80%? They don't say. So just a juxtaposition between Palestinian field reports and Israeli ones. Number 12 is a mortar operation by Syria al-Quds. And again, so this is in Jabalia. They're able to pick up on this position. The Israelis are on the outskirts. They're not even in the center of Jabalia. They're pushing in from the outskirts. They're destroying the schools. They're besieging the hospitals. And this fighter's pointing out the date of the operation, which was 21 November. They were able to put this video out. Again, really quickly, Syria al-Quds still operating. The Joint Operations Room is still operating. All of the 10 other factions are still in the battle. Syria al-Quds and the PFLP were firing mortars together yesterday. The day before that, Syria and the DFLP, the leftists, were firing mortars. I don't bring you these mortar operations all that often because that's pretty much all you see is them loading it up and firing it. But this was a particularly successful operation. I've edited out what Syria put in this operation, but they pointed out the casualty report from the Israeli military that matched that operation in Jabalia. And those operations are happening in the Netzarim corridor literally every single day. Also, number 13, the rocket units are still operating. This is Syria al-Quds 107 millimeter rocket artillery. Here you can see the sign that says that that's the rocket force from the north during the Battle of Al-Aqsa flood. And this fighter, as he's setting up this, he says in the background, he says, "We say to the occupation, no matter how much you assassinate us, no matter how long this war lasts, we will continue to fight. Even if we are slaughtered on a rock, we will continue to fight." He sets the timer. These rockets are launched by timer. So they set the rocket up in the afternoon. They launch the timer for 9 p.m. And the fighters then are not targeted after the launch of the rockets. So these rocket operations are continuing every day. The mortar operations are continuing every day, and qualitative operations like complex ambushes in Rafah, where the Israelis said they were that they don't exist anymore. And Dr. Issam pointed out that the population has been pushed completely out of Rafah. There's no, according to the Israelis, no humans left in Rafah, but the resistance is still there. So that is the resistance report for this week from Gaza. We are going to check in on Lebanon and the Lebanon ceasefire, which I said off the top is a word that Israel has removed meaning from, ceasefire, because they continue to fire during the ceasefire. UNIFIL pointed out at the end of the first week that there had been approximately 100 ceasefire violations by the Israelis. And after the 100th ceasefire violation, Hezbollah fired 2 rockets at the occupied Sheba farms, which is so targeting the occupied Sheba farms rather than actually targeting inside Israel. So Hezbollah, that was a warning shot by Hezbollah. They are adhering to the ceasefire. Israel's not. Israel can't occupy, they can't advance, and they can't handle a wider war. So what they're doing is moving this battle from what they couldn't achieve on the battlefield to change the conditions and try to achieve it under a ceasefire. We'll look at this first map here that tomorrow will pull up. And even Amos Hochstein, who is the UN envoy, said that the Israeli positions are 1 to 2 kilometers from the border and that these forces will pull out within days. So this is the IDF map that they released, showing the villages. These are the villages that they're not allowing people to return home to. Israel's not allowing people to return home because their people in the north aren't returning home, as I reported earlier in the war and has been reported a number of different ways. I showed you with the 60 Minutes video when they went into Metula. But the settlement committees themselves believe that as many as 40% of people aren't going to return to their northern settlements, whereas the Lebanese, the moment the ceasefire went into effect at 4 a.m, the roads were filled with cars traveling back down south. And that was the same in 2006. They immediately went home, and that was a source of pride for the Lebanese in 2006 after the July war, that how fast they got home after the end of the war. I was reporting from there at that time, and people would like call off their balcony to me, like, tell them that we were back at 11 a.m. You know, and someone would, the next down the road, would say, we got there at 10:45. People are just proud to be able to return immediately to their homes. And this is something that bothers Israel because their people aren't going to return to their homes. So they're carrying out this ceasefire, which is to last 60 days. It's now 1 week into the ceasefire. This is the moment that Israel is supposed to be pulling its first troops back from the border. They've killed 15 people at least since the ceasefire went into effect, and they've carried out over 30 airstrikes. And they write about this in their field reports. This isn't that you can just read it from the Israelis. They write about their violations of the ceasefire. So taking a look at this map 16, let's look at the next map and actually see what Israel was actually able to accomplish on the battlefield. The dark blue in this map is inside Israel. The powder blue, the light blue, that is the area that they attempted to capture. In almost all cases were unable to capture, because if we flip to the next one tomorrow, you can see I focused in on this. This is, first of all, by Israeli allies. This is the Institute for the Study of War and the American Enterprise Institute. These are right-wing think tanks aligned with the Israelis. And look at what the asterisk says. Assessed advances are areas where the Institute for the Study of War assess forces have operated in or launched attacks, but do not control. So even those little blue area, the light blue areas, they don't actually control that area according to their own allied think tanks. And so when you compare it with that map before it of what Israel is attempting to take now, Israel is now, since the ceasefire has been put into place, Israel's moving forward into territory that they could not capture on the battlefield. And that is the first week of this ceasefire, with scare quotes. I called it an uneven ceasefire. You can call it whatever you like, but at this point is very tenuous ceasefire that Israel is using to capture more territory that they couldn't capture on the battlefield. And if we look at the next map, we can see the Galilee Panhandle, which runs up north there. You can see along the blue line, the light blue lines those villages are right on the border. And you can see about midway up, that's the Litani River. That's where Israel believes that, according to their ceasefire, they're going to push Hezbollah behind the Litani River. That is not going to happen, because you can see where Israel actually controls a tiny strip along the border that will allow them to reinforce the border and maybe move their people home. But they're not going to achieve pushing Hezbollah beyond the Litani River when they're only 1 kilometer across the border. And again, the blue is inside Israel. So these aren't even these aren't even close to the Israeli map. The Israeli military, they went and did a photo as soon as the ceasefire went into effect. The Israelis moved forward to the Litani River there. You can see the Litani running across, and you can see how at the top on the right-hand side, the Litani River is very close to the Israeli border in that spot. It's only about 4 kilometers from the border in that spot. But Israel couldn't get those 4 kilometers in battle. If you move down to the south, the Litani River is 40 kilometers from the border. But where it begins at the arch at the top of the Panhandle, it's only 4 kilometers. So the moment the ceasefire went into effect, they sent a unit over to take photos of them walking along the Litani so that they could show their population, look, we made it to the Litani, when clearly they didn't, because you can see 𝐓𝐡𝐞. That's a village that I showed you operations. They were unable to capture 𝐓𝐡𝐞. Right, it's connected to the border, and they were unable to capture it in 71 days of battle. This is the Israeli military spokesperson framing their ceasefire. The Air Force will continue to fly over Lebanon's skies, collecting intelligence, and are prepared to operate wherever necessary. Hagari says in the coming weeks, the IDF will shape its defenses on the northern border and implement lessons from the past. So openly describing a ceasefire as offensive actions. Collecting intelligence, using the fact that Hezbollah is adhering to the ceasefire to gather intelligence. And they said their stats from this operation was that they carried out 12,500 airstrikes against Lebanon. 360 of them were in Beirut. And again, the map you're looking at is the most generous version of the map. In Hezbollah's statements, they talked about, so these are the first line villages that you heard being described for the first months of the war. Those are the first line villages. Israel said in the final 2 weeks that they were moving to the second line villages. Hezbollah denies that. They said that the second stage was merely a political and media announcement. Hezbollah said we have 300 defensive lines beyond the first line villages. And they described Hiam as the example of the failure of the second line villages for Israel to take. They didn't take those villages. They are stuck on the border about 1 kilometer to 2 kilometers from the border, not in villages and not taking over the villages until the ceasefire happened. And now they're moving and encroaching into those villages. So also this week, Hezbollah released some operations that took place before the ceasefire went into effect. So let's take a look at some of those, because they're notable operations for this next period of the post-ceasefire, or whatever this ceasefire, uneven ceasefire, because these are drone operations. If we look at number 20, it'll also tell you that this operation was on November 25th. So this is 1 day before the ceasefire. And look where Israeli positions are. They're literally on the border. That video is pointing out a hole in the fence that had been just opened up, and there's an excavator operating there. And this is an Al-Mezan top attack anti-tank guided missile. This is this missile that the Iranians reverse engineered from a spike system that was captured by Hezbollah in the 2006 war. And some people noted that the New York Times told you that may exist, that weapon may exist. We've been reporting on it here for 12 months, 11 and a half months. But even at the beginning, when we were watching Almas top attack, anti-tank guided missile strikes, Israel said that's not what we were watching. They have stopped doing that, but that's the extent that they're willing to go. That's a second excavator. The extent that Israel's military statements are willing to go to lie to you, to tell you that you're not seeing something that you're seeing with your own eyes. We talked about that last week when we saw the drone being downed, and Israel said the drone wasn't downed because Hezbollah released it in a field report, said a Hermes 450 𝐓𝐻𝐿 drone was downed, and Israel said no, it wasn't. And then the next day, Hezbollah released the video of the 𝐓𝐻𝐿 Hermes 450 being shot down. So just a propaganda game that I think people are aware that Israel's playing, because they do it with every aspect of this entire conflict, structurally lying about what is going on right since October 7th. Yeah, number 21 is an FPV drone strike, which is, I think, interesting. This is also the 25th, the day before the ceasefire went into effect. This video was released after the ceasefire in the week since you last saw me. So I wanted to bring you these operations that we hadn't seen before. Because this is an Ababil 2 drone. This is a step up FPV drone from the Shahed 101s that we see being used. And here it is locking in on an M113 that is used behind Israeli lines. So this is over the border behind the lines. And it locks on, gives you a first person view, and has obviously target acquisition that you can see there. Move into place pretty quickly and accurately hit the target. Those M113s, we can look at the next one. Those M113s don't have any kind of trophy system, but this is against a Nomer. And this is one of the ways that I was monitoring this battle in Lebanon to see if Israel actually was carrying out a maneuver, was how many armored personnel carriers were being destroyed inside Lebanon. If they were carrying out a massive mechanized advanced, they would be troop carriers in numbers. But in the Hezbollah numbers, this is the first Nomer that we saw in the 2-month stage of the battle, and it's behind lines, as you can see. Again, trophy system does not activate. You can watch when it comes in. The trophy's on the side; it would pop up. Even the Iron Fist, you can see that it doesn't exist on this vehicle. So the FPV drones, these are one-way attack drones that explode. They're essentially guided missiles. And these are weapons that can be used with precision if there's going to be ceasefire violations back and forth in the coming weeks, as something to watch for, because the drones will be used because of their accuracy. This was over in Yarin. And this one, more just to show you here from an operation, this is a tunnel-fed operation. This is why they're not going to push. The Israelis can't say that Hezbollah can't operate from the Litani. They come down through that tunnel. They prop it up with a stick here. They emerge, and they set up their drone launches and move through the bush, so they're sheltered. And there's nothing Israel can do about this. They are unable to achieve on the battlefield the taking of the major villages that would prevent, if you want to say, Hezbollah from operating in this way, which I don't think they ever could do. And that's why I was skeptical about Israel's intentions in South Lebanon, because this is not, they couldn't do it in 2006. There's no way they can do it in 2024. And they showed that. They showed that by pulling out, and basically, essentially, this operation is to secure the border. But we've seen this all throughout the war. I've shown you the rockets from underground launch pads, underground missile bases, which allow these rocket units to both feed the munition and to launch them. So there's no way 80% of Hezbollah's rockets were destroyed. It's just an absurd number. We look at the next one. We've got a couple graphics here about the operation that I wanted to bring to you. So Hezbollah marks the battle as 72 days. They mark the beginning of the battle as September 17th. That was the day of the pager operation, and they carried out during this period 23 operations per day for a total of 1,666 military operations. They cited 130 killed, 1,250 wounded. The IDF's numbers were not far off that. The IDF had claimed upwards of 75, and then they didn't count the 25 or 30 civilian contractors that were working in the settlements. So you essentially get the same number. And just actually yesterday, the Israelis released that they carried out 700 medevac missions from medical evacuation, medevac missions from Lebanon. So 700, if there's 2 in the medevac, you get the same number. So again, fidelity and honesty in the Hezbollah operations. So they said they targeted 540 settlements across the north, 420 military points, 211 bases, and 147 border points. They confronted 31 advances. So Israel attempted in 31 different places, or 31 times, often in the same place. As we know in 𝐓𝐿, they tried over and over again. 31 advances in the 72 days. So that doesn't seem like they had the stomach for a battle, because that's one advance every other day. And that's an indication that they didn't believe that they could break through Hezbollah's lines. They're just doing probing operations to try to see if they could move forward without their tanks getting hit. Their tanks get hit by anti-tank weapons that have a range of 5 to 10 kilometers away. So that's one of the reasons why we don't see a ton of footage from the battle, because unlike Qassam and Gaza hitting with Yassins from 50 meters away with cameras on their heads, you don't get very good imagery from a 6-kilometer distance from their anti-tank weapons. Enemy losses, they say, Hezbollah said 76 military vehicles, 55 command centers, 32 artillery positions, weapons used, 1,285 rocket barrages. That's rocket barrages, separate barrages, not weapons used. And again, they talk about 93 artillery operations. That's number of operations, not number of munitions used. They launched 166 drones in the 72 days. They used 86 anti-tank guided missiles, which again, indication of that matches the enemy vehicles, 76 enemy vehicles, 86 anti-tank weapons used. It doesn't seem like Israel was attempting with their fragile, exhausted army to push to seriously push into Lebanon. So now they're trying to achieve what they couldn't get in battle in this ceasefire. So we'll keep tracking that. Number 25 shows Israeli numbers. This is how Israel does their numbers. Just 12,000 UAVs, explosives, and weapons. It just gives you an idea, even if this is their, we saw a lot of captured weapons from Hezbollah forward positions, but it just gives you a sense of how massive Hezbollah's arsenal is. If we're just talking 1 to 2 kilometers from the border, and Israel's saying that they captured 13,000 anti-tank missiles and rockets, gives you an idea. Because Hezbollah is not built up to defend the border, they're built up to defend the Litani and the lines before the Litani. They have significant firepower. And in the last slide here from Lebanon, this is what Israel actually targets. This is from the Lebanese Public Health Emergency Operations Center. 3,961 people were killed by Israel, 16,520 wounded, 250 of them children, and 1,500 kids wounded. And of course, the targeting of hospitals, you see there, ambulance centers, 40 hospitals targeted, 94 ambulance centers, 251 ambulances. They killed 222 health workers and paramedics in double tap strikes where they bomb, then they wait for the emergency personnel to show up and they hit it again, which was a tactic used by Al-Qaeda it's a terror tactic to maximize civilian casualties that the Israelis use And that's really the outcome of their battle in Lebanon, is the targeting of the healthcare system and their inability to advance. So we will continue to follow the ceasefire. That is the resistance report from Lebanon and from Gaza, and we will stay on top of the ceasefire and the battle going forward, as we have up till now. But that is the resistance report.
Thank you so much, Jon. Yeah, I mean, it's been really, I don't know, frustrating, such a mild word to use, but, seeing, I mean, just even yesterday, there were Israeli airstrikes on villages in South Lebanon that killed people and obliterated their homes. And, people talk about moving to, something of like a low intensity war. But this is still, as you said, this is what Israel always is able to get away with, where they can say a ceasefire. And we even talked about this weeks ago when Netanyahu said, yeah, we want a ceasefire, but we're still going to be allowed to fire.
The same in Gaza, because that's what they want.
The same in Gaza. Exactly. So we're just seeing this, and seeing the corporate media, the New York Times playing along with it. I mean, it's just, of course, the U.S. State Department won't be clear about Lebanon's right to defend itself, of course, against these egregious ceasefire violations. So it just, is this the new normal? Is this so-called low-intensity war where Israel gets to just carpet bomb areas of South Lebanon? And it won't be considered a break of the ceasefire. Is this what we're now going to expect? What comes
This is what
next?
the first week had in store. This is a 60-day ceasefire. Amos Hochstein, the envoy who made the deal, said that
Israeli tank commander Amos Hochstein,
right?
Israeli tank commander. He said that the deal is supposed to, Israeli troops are supposed to be withdrawing. Their first withdrawal is supposed to be happening any day now. So we'll see if that happens. It's supposed to.
Or else what? Like what? Who is going to? Again, like it comes to this thing
Blinken was
enforcement.
Yeah, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was actually asked about Lebanon just a couple of hours ago at a press conference he gave at the NATO meeting. And he was asked by, one of these very mainstream reporters, how can you call it a ceasefire when, there's firing going on, and Israel in particular? Can you confirm there have been ceasefires? And he said, he gave this non-answer about, well, we established this monitoring mechanism with France and the United States, and it's working. But he wouldn't be drawn on whether there were violations of the ceasefire. So this goes to show that the US is willing to go to any length to justify what Israel does, as if we needed to know that. But I mean, it's going to be complete continuity between this administration and the next one. No change is expected.
Right. And we can expect, as you said, Jon, like any, there's talks of a ceasefire yet again. What is this? The, 30th time in the last 14 months where there's, discussions of a possible ceasefire for Gaza. But again, we see, as you pointed out, the entrenchment of the military base in the Netzarim corridor. And of course, Israel will, expect to say that the ceasefire only pertains to Hamas and the Palestinian resistance, and Israel reserves the right to carpet bomb as they see fit. But again, this is, I don't know. This is to be expected. This is to be, this is what Israel has always done through these last 76 years. They propose something, they violate it, and they do it again. And again, the issue of enforcement and holding it accountable is always missing. Anyway, there's also what happened this week. as just within hours of the Lebanon-Israel, uneven ceasefire, we saw something emerge in the situation emerge in Syria. And it's been very interesting to see how that's been explained or described by both Western corporate media and regional media as well. And Ali, I know you wanted to kind of take us back, 10 years to quickly, lay out the context for what we're seeing now in Syria and why it's important to keep an eye on how it's being reported, who stands to benefit, Israel's role in all of this, of course, the U.S.'s role in all of this, and what comes next for the region.
Right. Well, let's start with where we are now. And of course, what is happening in Syria is a continuation of the long civil war there, the dirty war that was put on hold for a couple of years. And people get very, this can be a controversial topic because people think that when you talk about Syria, it's a litmus test on whether you love or hate the government of Syria or love or hate the president of Syria. And that's not the case at all, because you can rightly criticize all of the Arab regimes without exception, including, of course, the ones that are closest to Israel and the United States, for being completely undemocratic and dictatorial. And just as you could Saddam Hussein, the ruler of Iraq, and opposition to US intervention in Iraq was not the same thing as cheerleading for Saddam Hussein. So I just want to say that at the outset, so people don't try to misrepresent our discussion of the facts and the interests which are going on. But let's start from where we are now, Nora, which is the comments of U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Again, this is him speaking at the NATO press conference earlier today, responding to a question about Syria.
I think what we've just seen in Syria with the offensive by HTS reflects the fact that Assad's key backers, key allies, whether it's Russia, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Iran, have all, in different ways, been distracted, notably by problems of their own making. And it looks like HTS took advantage of that fact. Right now, I think what's so critical.
Right. So,
just remind us what HTS is, who these players are, maybe just to give people a little bit more.
Yeah. So HTS is 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿, which is one of these rebel groups backed by the United States and Turkey that has been sort of corralled into Idlib province for the last few years under the de-escalation agreements that were come to. And they, just hours after the Lebanon ceasefire, burst out of Idlib and took over Aleppo, which is Syria's largest city, and certainly a very historically a very important economic hub. And this timing, why this, these groups have been effectively dormant for the past few years, why they would engage in this sudden offensive now is the question that people have been asking. And one answer comes from Saeed Araqat, and this is in an article that he published the other day in Al-Quds.com. Saeed Araqat, of course, is a very well-known Palestinian journalist. He can often be seen, one of maybe 2 or 3 journalists who regularly challenge the State Department spokespersons at the State Department briefings every day. And a quick translation of his story, which is headlined, "The HTS attack on Aleppo was coordinated by the Biden administration with Turkey and Israel." And what Saeed Araqat reports is that an informed source told Al-Quds on Saturday that the attack by 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿, which is affiliated with Al-Qaeda, on the positions of the Syrian state and the regular army came as a result of an American-Israeli emergency plan coordinated by the administration of President Joe Biden with Turkey, and, quote, was implemented according to an American vision for the second day of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Lebanon, end quote. That's where he's quoting the source. Especially in the light of the failure to achieve a decisive Israeli victory against Hezbollah, and that this is an effort to inflict a defeat on Iran and its allies in the region, such as the Syrian army that regained control of Aleppo more than 8 years ago. And his source, he describes him as someone, presumably a US official, who is involved in training the Syrian rebels, such as the Free Syrian Army, Jabhat al-Nusra, and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham at bases in Jordan and Turkey at the end of the Obama administration. So that's one answer. Also, we have another interesting piece of news from Reuters, and this story, which is headlined, US UAE, that's the United Arab Emirates, discussed lifting Assad sanctions in exchange for break with Iran, sources say. And it reports that the US and the United Arab Emirates have discussed with each other the possibility of lifting sanctions on Syrian President Bashar al-Assad if he peels himself away from Iran and cuts off weapons routes to Lebanon's Hezbollah, 5 people familiar with the matter said. And of course, note here that they say sanctions on President Bashar al-Assad, but actually the sanctions are not just on President Bashar al-Assad, they're on the whole Syrian economy. And they are sanctions that are calculated to cause as much suffering to the civilian population in Syria as possible, as is always the case with Western sanctions, whether they're against Iraq or Iran or against Palestinians in Gaza. That's always the goal. So you can see here the interest here is not about bringing peace and democracy and apple pie and human rights to Syria. It's about making Syria fall into line behind the US and its vassals and Israel in the region. And so, what we're learning here is that the US and its allies would be perfectly happy to see Bashar al-Assad remain in power in Syria. They don't mind him being dictatorial, just as they don't mind the UAE being very dictatorial, or Saudi Arabia or Jordan, just as long as they're in line. So that's what's at stake here. Mm-hmm. And then another story, and this is highlighted by Benjamin Norton, that we saw in the Times of Israel just in recent days. And this is of a genre. We saw these sorts of stories week after week during the height of the war in Syria, of so-called rebel commanders in Syria speaking to the Israeli media and telling them that how much the rebels are in line. And of course, when we say the rebels, we're not talking about the Syrian people or Syrians who have a sincere and genuine dislike or opposition to their government, which is the right of everyone in the world to oppose their government. We're talking about these particular US-backed groups. And in this story in the Times of Israel, they say a Syrian rebel involved in a re-energized insurgency challenging regime forces reportedly told an Israeli network that the IDF's campaign against Iran-backed forces had likely aided opposition fighters who managed to capture Aleppo and the other areas in a lightning offensive last week. And there are all sorts of quotes in this story in the Time of Israel about them saying, look, we're not against Israel. Israel is basically helping us in our cause. And so now I'll just give a couple of things of background. And I know that Asa has some things he wants to say about this too. But really, what this goes back to is that in 2011, after when we saw these popular uprisings across the Arab region, starting in Tunisia and then Egypt and country after country that threatened the existing order, and we saw protests in Syria, very quickly this was hijacked by a massive US-led CIA-run operation to turn to activate basically US aligned rebels in Syria. And this is not this is all done out in the open. So for example, we can take a look at this story from the New York Times from 2016. It's from January 24th, 2016, headlined, US relies heavily on Saudi money to support Syrian rebels. So, of course, Saudi Arabia being very famous for supporting democracy and self-determination and human rights across the region. And the story starts, when President Obama secretly authorized the Central Intelligence Agency to begin arming Syria's embattled rebels in 2013, the spy agency knew it would have a willing partner to help pay for the covert operation. It was the same partner the CIA has relied on for decades for money and discretion in far-off conflicts, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Since then, the CIA and its Saudi counterpart have maintained an unusual arrangement for the rebel training mission, which the Americans have codenamed Timber Sycamore. Under the deal, current and former administration officials said the Saudis contribute both weapons and large sums of money, and the CIA takes the lead in training the rebels on AK-47 assault rifles and tank-destroying missiles. And they also point out that this is another chapter in a US-Saudi alliance that goes back to the support for the so-called Mujahideen in Afghanistan that gave birth to what we now know as Al-Qaeda. And then another story, this is from the following year, this is from early 2017, and in this story, this is about the end of Timber Sycamore, and it says here, the end came quickly for one of the costliest covert action programs in the history of the CIA. During a White House briefing earlier last month, CIA Director Mike Pompeo recommended to President Trump that he shut down a 4-year-old effort to arm and train Syrian rebels. The president swiftly ended the program. And this is, of course, so that Trump came in and ended Barack Obama's massive $1.5 billion. They actually give the sums in the story. And what they also say in this New York Times story is that the CIA-trained fighters crossed into Syria. Once CIA-trained fighters crossed into Syria, CIA officers had difficulty controlling them. And they say that most of the weapons ended up with fighters from Nusra Front, from Nusra Front and other groups that were affiliated or are affiliated with Al-Qaeda. And finally, one other piece. This is the famous email from Jake Sullivan to Hillary Clinton in 2012, and this comes to us from WikiLeaks. Jake Sullivan, of course, today is the national security advisor in the Biden administration. He was working for Hillary Clinton at the time, and there you can see highlighted in this WikiLeaks email the famous sentence written by Jake Sullivan, Al-Qaeda AQ, Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. And of course, ending Timber Sycamore in 2017 when Trump came to power did not really end the US support for these specific groups in Syria, whose goal appears to be to take advantage of the situation in Lebanon. And according to the source spoken to by Saeed Araqat, another goal is to, of course, because Russia has a major presence in Syria, to also tie up Russia and to create more problems for Russia as the Biden administration goes out. It's really to create maximum chaos in the region. And of course, Turkey had to have, and this has also been reported in the Washington Post and New York Times in recent days, really gave the green light for the operation, because these groups, without Turkish support and logistics, would not have been able to carry out this offensive.
And this is, I mean, it's really despicable to see Turkey, whose leader Erdogan said just weeks ago, he was enforcing some sort of sanctions against Israel because of the genocide in Gaza. And then he does an about face, and, he sticks to the NATO talking points, policy memos, and comes to Israel's and the US's, aid in helping them reignite this chaos in Syria.
And I will say, it's remember last week, I think it was last week or the week before, time is strange now, but when we were talking about the Lebanon ceasefire and the speech that Joe Biden made announcing the Lebanon ceasefire, and we noted at the time the strange inclusion of Turkey in the list of countries that are now being named as mediators for Gaza. So he named Turkey. He said we're making efforts along with partners including Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey. And this was the first time we had ever heard Turkey mentioned in this context, and it was very strange and very notable. And what it seems to me is that there was some kind of quid quo pro here. I'm speculating. I don't have evidence for this, but I can see something where the US and Turkey have a discussion and they say, well, we want to activate these rebels, and Turkey plays a key role in that, given the effective control over Idlib and the border between Syria and Turkey, where the equipment and the weapons and so on comes in. And Turkey saying, well, we want some kind of role related to Gaza. We want to be at the table. We want to have... So you can see that there is something behind Turkey's inclusion. We don't know the full story yet, but I won't be surprised at all if it turns out to be connected to this reawakening of these US-backed groups in Syria.
Yeah. And I think, just one more thing. For people who, this is maybe new, or this is different from what people have been told in the media. What does the US and Israel and NATO, for that matter, get out of fomenting this chaos yet again in Syria? What are the Western imperialist, hegemonic goals here?
I mean, it's, they've said it, Syria was on the original list of countries for regime change of the neocons back in the early 2000s, that after Iraq, they were going to do Syria and they were going to do Iran. They did Libya, turning them into failed states. And the reason is that Syria has been the bridge between Iran and the resistance in Lebanon for decades. And the connection between Iran and Syria goes back many decades. During the 1980s, the Iran-Iraq war, Iraq was backed by the West completely in order to try to destroy or weaken post-revolutionary Iran. The Gulf states all funded the Iraqi war on Iran. The weapons were transferred through Jordan. I remember seeing when I was a child, we'd go down to Aqaba. That whole road from Aqaba was just trucks and trucks and trucks coming up from Aqaba to Iraq and supplying Iraq. Jordan served the role of supplying Iraq in this Western-backed. Remember the role that France and Germany played. Germany, very famous for its use of poison gases in the most inhumane and horrifying ways, supplied Iraq with the chemical weapons that it used, or the precursors for the chemical weapons that it used against Iran. During that war, Syria stood on the side of Iran. So that gives you the length of that alliance, and this is about breaking that link between Syria and Iran, and Syria's place as a bridge between the resistance in Lebanon, particularly Hezbollah, and Iran. And of course, this, that has nothing to do with the nature of the Syrian regime. You could have an even worse Syrian regime than this one, but as long as it was allied with the United States and Israel, nobody would, the West wouldn't complain about it. They would be signing deals with it and so on. That's the important thing to understand. They don't care about Syrians. They don't care about human rights or democracy in Syria. They care about turning Syria into another country that is subservient to their interests in the region. And what that means is that if you really care about Syria or Libya or Jordan or any country in the region and want to see the people of those countries be able to express self-determination, development, to build their countries the way they want. That is never going to happen in the context of US imperialism, hegemony, regime change wars that aim to turn countries into vassals of the United States and destroy them if they refuse. Because that's what has happened to country after country in the region. And if people don't see that now at this point, with everything that's out in the open, I mean, I'm not sure what else we can say.
Yeah, and the reality is that Syria provides a land bridge to supply weapons to Hezbollah. So this is about dividing the resistance axis, and the timing of the offensive on Aleppo of the armed groups' offensive against Aleppo to capture Aleppo. To me, it's not a coincidence that it's exactly aligned with the uneven ceasefire, as we've been calling it. And it's tomorrow. If you could cue up my second article first, perhaps, because I just want to re-emphasize when we have Anthony Blinken in that video at the beginning talking about Hayat Tahrir al-Sham,
not condemning it in any way. I'm sorry to interrupt, Asa, but it was important that he didn't have anything negative to say about them.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to emphasize who they are. This is an article that we published back in 2016. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, in a nutshell, is Al-Qaeda. This is one of the rebrandings of Al-Qaeda. The Syrian affiliate of Al-Qaeda was Jabhat al-Nusra, and it was then, this article in 2016, it was renamed to Jabhat Fatah al-Sham. That was widely sort of mocked and seen through, and then it was kind of reconfigured and rebranded again in 2017 as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. All the groups were all led by Mohammed al-Jilani, and there was a lot of talk about moderate rebels and moderate Al-Qaeda, but it's the same ideology. It's an anti-government organization. It's you could consider it as a Islamic extremist organization. But the point is, the United States empire will use any kinds of groups as long as it serves its purposes. So we also, tomorrow, if you could go back to the first one, we also published this story in 2015, and this is about, so it wasn't just the United States aiding Al-Qaeda in Syria, it was also Israel. So there was multiple reports of the Israeli military aiding Jabhat al-Nusra, the Syrian Al-Qaeda, in the occupied sector of the Golan Heights, which is southwestern Syria, occupied by Israel for many decades. And they were using that in order to aid Al-Qaeda, in order to essentially to break up the resistance axis. It's the same purpose. And just a couple of quotes from this article. In a video report released by Vice News in December 2014, that is, in which Israeli soldiers are shown transferring wounded Syrian opposition fighters to an Israeli hospital, the narrator acknowledges that the fighters could be affiliated with al-Nusra, Syrian Al-Qaeda. Israeli media has been slightly more open about Israel's embrace of Al-Qaeda. The news website Ynet has posted footage of Israeli army medics treating wounded Syrian opposition fighters, noting it is likely that most, if not all, of these nationals are rebels from the rival jihadist Islamic State and Al-Nusra Front groups. Retired Brigadier General Michael Herzog, a former chief of staff for Israel's defense minister, told the Wall Street Journal that, quote, Nusra is a unique version of Al-Qaeda. They managed to cooperate with non-Islamist and non-jihadi organizations in one coalition. So even then, they're trying to, you have Israel kind of trying to do a PR effort on behalf of Al-Qaeda. Quote continues, they are totally focused on the war in Syria and aren't focused on us. But when Hezbollah and Iran and others are pushing south, they are very much focused on us. And later on, Ephraim Halevi, the former head of Mossad, Israeli spy agency, confirmed in an interview with Al Jazeera English that Israel had aided Al-Qaeda troops, Al-Nusra Front, by treating them in their field hospitals in the occupied Golan Heights. And although we tried to spin this as a humanitarian, the fighters were sent back. It's not as if they were it's not as if the fighters were sort of imprisoned. They were sent back to fight again in Syria, and also he clarified that there was no way that they would have done such a thing if they'd been able to capture Hezbollah fighters, which of course it doesn't seem they have been able to. And so it's an active Israeli aiding of Al-Qaeda in Syria, and that, you know, there's reason to believe that that is still ongoing, as we saw from that Times of Israel article that Ali quoted earlier on. And it was, you know, if it's worth going and reading this article after the stream, because it also gets into UN reports which detailed actual arms being sent from Israel to Al-Qaeda in Syria. So, and finally, just quickly on the final article tomorrow, more recently, this article from July last year, from before the genocide in the Gaza Strip started, a few months before, it was revealed in July last year that a former Israeli military intelligence officer, Elizabeth Serkov, prominent on social media, had been taken prisoner in Iraq, and Israeli officials denied that she was a Mossad agent. But as we covered in this article that we published in July last year, she'd certainly been an Israeli asset of some kind, at least in the past. According to her own words on her social media, she said, quote, I was in intelligence. So military intelligence, it seems to have been the Israeli military intelligence. As well as trying to incite sectarian tensions in Iraq, Elizabeth Serkov also boasted of her contacts with anti-government armed groups in Syria. Quote, as part of my research, I've maintained contacts with members of 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐜𝐿 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐲𝐝, Al-Qaeda. I've been able to affect their worldview to some extent. That's what she said.
And she also wrote the famous article in Foreign Policy, a very mainstream American publication, detailing the military assistance and financing that Israel had given to about a dozen armed groups in Syria. So she seems to have been the liaison with many of those groups. I do want to say, Asa, I mean, other than what was in that Times of Israel story, we don't know that Israel is playing an active role right now. But they may be, they may not be. But what we're also trying to do is just give people a sense of the history here. This didn't all start last week, and people need to understand the context and history to some extent.
Yeah, and for our most youngest of all viewers, who may not even know, Al-Qaeda is the group behind 9/11.
The long
and it's
storied
a group
history
that
of
descends, again, not to go back too far into history, that the history of the United States mobilizing politicized versions of Islam. I say versions of Islam because, of course, these are not necessarily mainstream. goes back to the 1950s, when the United States saw that as a way to counter the growing support for communism and socialism across the Arab world and the decolonizing world. And so they sponsored these types of extremist groups that are not in tune with the majority of people in the region. And that, of course, continued in Afghanistan in the 1980s, the funding of the so-called Mujahideen. These were US-backed groups, and which then, as we said, morphed into Al-Qaeda, and we had what we call blowback against the United States. But these groups continue to be useful to the United States, just as other fringe groups, whether it's Nazi aligned groups in Ukraine or other parts of Europe, continue to be useful to the geopolitics of the US empire. And we have to be aware and not get played by that, and not mix this stuff up with the genuine struggles and legitimate struggles of the people of Syria and every other country for their own self-determination. Yeah. Just because someone is a Palestinian doesn't mean they represent all Palestinians. Mahmoud Abbas and his US-backed forces don't represent the Palestinian people. They don't speak for us. They don't act on our behalf. But that doesn't mean the Palestinian people aren't engaged in a just and legitimate struggle for their rights and self-determination. So we have to be really discerning about how we talk about this topic, because, people know that there is an effort to prevent free and open discussion of the facts around this issue, which is why I'm in a sense laboring this point.
Yeah. Jon, I'd love to know your thoughts. You've studied the situation in Syria, especially in the context of Western power for a long time. How are you looking at this, and what do you think is important for our listeners and viewers to know about what we're seeing now?
Well, I think, everybody was surprised. It was a shock advance, a lightning advance that I don't think people saw. I think maybe now, pretty quickly you could see the reasons why that would happen. The ceasefire froze Hezbollah, in theory, into positions that would make them unavailable to fight. It was Hezbollah primarily that defeated these groups, HTS. And in the intermediate period, HTS has attempted to, in the way they distance themselves from Al-Qaeda, to not be as sectarian as the Takfiri strains were, and attempted to professionalize governance in Idlib during that period. But the thing that's the most instructive, I think, just straight up, is that you brought up a bunch of Israeli newspaper and television reports. You can find them all over. The Israeli television has the fighters on air, and they have a military censor that we're now 14 months into covering this war in Gaza. And we know the military censor in Israel doesn't allow any kind of meaningful information to get. Like, the idea that they would have a Palestinian fighter on their television is against the law in their country. And it wasn't 20 minutes after the shock advance and they're on TV in Israel. And it's just very remarkable in these moments, when we're so immersed in this war in Gaza and things are so clear, the way the Israelis operate. And then you see this thing that would never be allowed, because the term for the censorship is about enemies. It's about the capabilities of your enemies. You're not allowed to speak about the capabilities of your enemies, or have your enemies speak about their capabilities. So they're clearly, they don't see these Syrian rebels that were defeated by Hezbollah as their enemies. And I have a bit from Army Radio. Netanyahu convened an urgent meeting immediately after the lightning advance, and said that, first of all, Israel this was an Army Radio story. First of all, Israel has a great interest in what is happening in Syria. From conversations I've been having in the last few hours with senior IDF officials, it appears the security system is closely following the dramatic events there. The rebels' attack on Hezbollah and Iranian militias may somewhat serve the interests of Israel. As Hezbollah and the militias are busy repelling the attack, they're not preparing to attack Israel. And so, the ability to freeze Hezbollah in their positions with this ceasefire is really what allowed that advance to move forward. Now, taking Aleppo as being like years now, I think like 4 years they've held the hinterland in Idlib. It's essentially like a jihadist penal colony. For them to move down into Aleppo and take it it was surprising, but there didn't get much resistance. I think I'll be watching closely if, the battle in Hama, if they're able to move down the highway, I think that will be more telling than their ability to capture Aleppo, because the Syrians were part of this war that Israel's been carrying out. There's been hundreds of airstrikes, as many as 1,000 airstrikes in Syria over the course of this time. They're weakened by that. Hezbollah is not in a strong position, being frozen in the ceasefire, and HTS took advantage of that. It's not clear how popular they are taking Aleppo. The media shows us that they're the Gulf media shows us that they're liberators, but that's not entirely clear at this point, 1 week in, that's the case.
Yeah, these are the same Gulf outlets, of course, that were funding all of these, many of these groups all along as well.
Although it's notable that it's not, in the first time round, I showed that New York Times report from 2016 about how Saudi Arabia was one of the major funders. It wasn't just Saudi Arabia. That was a big one, but Qatar was involved and the UAE was involved. This time round, it seems that the Saudis and the UAE are less enthusiastic about this. Qatar still seems to be on board along with Turkey, and that's also why Al Jazeera, whose coverage, and I'm talking about Al Jazeera Arabic, their coverage on Palestine is excellent, but it becomes rather propagandistic when it comes to this issue. And the one thing I want to say is that this issue of Syria plays in directly to the efforts to sectarianize discourse in the region and to divide the region along sectarian lines and to turn people in the region against the resistance and the axis of resistance on the basis that this is a so-called Shia axis or Shia crescent representing, the Shia stream of Islam, and to turn people against them on that basis. And so to talk about Iran as, Shia imperialism, to talk about Hezbollah as an arm of Iran, and all of this rhetoric, which was really pushed by the United States and Israel and their allies in the Gulf over the last decade or so with particular intensity, is designed to delegitimize and sap support from the resistance. And this was particularly true. There was a surge of this, for those who are old enough to remember, after Israel's defeat in Lebanon in 2006, when Hezbollah's stock rose across the region. They were seen as heroes for defeating Hezbollah, and they were seen as an Arab, Muslim, indigenous, anti-colonial resistance movement. And so there was a huge propaganda effort to rebrand Hezbollah as a sectarian Shia militia that is an arm of Iran and an enemy of the Sunni Muslims in the region. And this propaganda campaign was to a large extent successful with many people. Many people buy into this sectarian bullshit. Let's say it as it is. And so it's also not a coincidence that we see the revival of this sectarian discourse or an effort to revive it in the wake of Israel completely failing to impose its will on Lebanon. Yes, they inflicted great suffering and pain on Lebanon and its people, but they didn't break the resistance. As Jon has shown us week after week, they're barely able to set foot in Lebanon, and Hezbollah is strong. I mean, yes, they have said, Hassan Nasrallah in his last speech before his murder said, we suffered blows. We were willing to pay a price, but then they're not close to being broken. But this is an effort to try to isolate them politically while again breaking that link between Iran and the rest of the resistance by going after Syria again. And again, I'll say this, no one in the region is going to have their self-determination, their freedom, their ability to choose their path as their government in any country, particularly the vassals of the United States, while we have this US empire in the region. It's incompatible. Nothing is more incompatible with democracy and freedom and self-determination than the intervention of the United States.
Yeah, and the Palestinian resistance is very clear on where they stand on HTS and this lightning advance. They all spoke in unison, calling them traitors and terrorists and foreign fighters. That's the other thing that I don't know if we even mentioned that. They're the shock troops that advanced were foreign fighters. They weren't. They were predominantly foreign fighters, not Syrians. So
yeah, and remember as well, Hezbollah actually fought against these groups, for the longest time. But that's not going to be able to happen now. Hezbollah were invited into the country by the Syrian government in order to help fight against these groups, and was successful in doing that. They're not, as Jon has alluded to, they're not going to be doing that now. They're busy defending the border from the Israeli invasion. So they picked their moment. Absolutely.
Yeah, the timing is always important to factor in when trying to figure out the context of U.S.-Israeli involvement around the region. Thank you so much. Obviously, we'll update as necessary, but as always, our focus is on Palestine, Gaza in particular, and that's what we will always continue to do. Let's take a quick look at the website. Ali, you wanted to say a little bit more about how people can support the Electronic Intifada, our writers in Gaza, people who put this show and this publication together.
Yeah, I'll just say again, for those who are still with us or joined us, thank you again to everybody who responded so generously to our Giving Tuesday appeal yesterday. And we were able to earn all $35,000 of those matching funds that a couple of truly incredible, generous people put forward to try to encourage people to support our work and journalism. We actually raised more than twice that amount, which is incredible. And people are still making donations. You can see on the website, it says donate now at the top right corner. You can donate from any country. You can set up a monthly donation for as little as $5 if you want to, or as much as you like. Again, the thing I want to emphasize here is that over the last year, we've reached millions of people all over the world. Our work is always going to be free to people. We're never going to have a paywall. We're never going to charge people to read our articles or anything like that. But what makes it possible is that a relatively small number of people in the grand scheme of things are willing to support this work. And those are truly special people because they're not doing it just for themselves. They're doing it because they want to help us spread this information to people all over the world. So when you donate to the Electronic Intifada, you are helping us to produce all this work, to pay our editors, to pay our videographers, to keep the website online, of course, to pay our writers in Gaza and all over the world where we work with writers, because we try to bring stories from everywhere. But you're also helping us to spread this information to people. So thank you very much. Oh, the one thing I wanted to say is, think of this as a gift to everyone in the world who needs this information about Palestine. And if you have some extra funds that you can share, that's fantastic. If you don't, we don't want you to donate, because we don't want anyone to go without something they need, or for their family to go without something they need. There's enough people who have the resources, and that's who we're asking to. And also give in other ways. Give by sharing the stories. We're going to cut that beautiful, wonderful interview with Donya about the work she's doing with children into a separate video. We're going to put that online on our YouTube channel. And so that's one example of something you can share with people, as well as all these fantastic articles on the website. So thank you, everyone. Sorry for the long pitch, but that's the time of year. And we do it now so that the rest of the year we can focus on just doing the journalism for you.
That's right. Thanks, Ali. And yeah, just a reminder to go to our website. We have, it's just jam-packed with new features, really incredible writing from our contributors in Gaza. We have some new analysis pieces by our staff writers. I did a podcast that we published yesterday, an interview with a midwife who worked in Gaza for 6 weeks over the summer, and the details of her work and what women and families, babies, and healthcare providers are going through right now is just horrific, but it's really important information. So check that out.
It's a great interview, Nora. I listened to it yesterday, and it's really powerful and important for people to know.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. And that's, that work is only possible with support from our listeners and readers and viewers. And so thank you again. Sign up for our email list and subscribe to our YouTube channel, all the things. Thank you to Mara Nassar for production and direction of the live stream and the podcast. Also want to thank Maureen Claire Murphy, our senior editor, for pre-production and writing, Michael Brown for fact-checking, Ellie Gerzon for social media, everyone at the Electronic Intifada, John, Asa, Ali, thank you all, and we'll see you next week.